Chapter 189. She used so much force. Brother Xianxia, I feel like my toes are going to break. Lu Jingtian lamented pitifully. I didn't. Unspoken tried to explain herself in a fluster, but she looked helpless as if she had no way to defend herself. Inside, however, she thought to herself, my toes are definitely fractured. I know very well how hard she used. Even though I've always been compromising, it's all for Yu's sake. I'm not a pushover, I won't reject anyone who wants to bully me. She could vaguely tell that Lu Jingtian was not someone to be trifled with, but who asked her to be the one to trip her up first? She was merely giving her a taste of her own medicine, so it was not overboard. She could offend anyone she wanted. She had offended so many people today, and she was not one of them. Gu Xianxia knitted his brows. He had a close relationship with Lu Jingtian, but she was used to acting coquettishly, so her words were often exaggerated. Gu Xianxia naturally did not believe her easily, so he only said, I'll get someone to send you to the infirmary right away. Brother Xianxia, why are you so biased toward her? That little b*tch clearly stepped on me on purpose. Mu Yaja looked in Unspoken's direction with a deep frown. He was already very displeased from the moment she entered the venue. He originally thought that this woman was tactful enough, but he did not expect her to appear together with Gu Xianxia. At this moment, Xiao Chen, who was standing beside him, also had a gloomy look on his face. The spot where Lu Jingtian fell was not far from where he was standing. From the moment Unspoken entered the venue, Xiao Chen's entire attention was on him. The only thing the father and son had in common was that Xiao Chen was equally unhappy with such a beautiful sister holding another man's arm. What happened next, though, was inconceivable to him despite his young age. Lu Jingtian actually stretched out her leg to trip him. He saw it clearly, but it was too late for him to stop her. He did not expect things to develop in an unexpected direction, though, naturally, the people on the second floor could clearly see the chaos that had occurred. Yun Tianyu only heard Lu Jingtian's unreasonable crying and accusations. It was clear that she wanted to put Unspoken in a disadvantageous position. His face turned red with anger. How dare you bully my mommy? Agent Li, what is this woman's name? Agent Li said bitterly, I don't know. You. Didn't you do your homework before coming here? The female celebrities I like aren't from Huanyu. Li Hanlin said innocently with a pitiful look on his face. But President Yun, I will investigate this matter thoroughly after the party ends. Yun Tianyu leaned on the railing and looked around for a while before anxiously saying, No, I want to go down. Li Hanlin, on the other hand, quickly picked him up. Director Yun, stop messing around. You can't go now. Your identity cannot be exposed for the time being. No, this pretty sister didn't step on you. Just as Yun Tianyu was worrying, a tender voice came from downstairs. With a dark face, he looked in the direction of the voice and saw Xiao Chen unhappily saying, This pretty sister was walking fine, but you stretched out your leg to trip her. It's your fault. Yun Tianyu's face darkened when he heard this. Pretty sister? This little brat actually called his biological mommy, pretty sister? Yun Tianyu, who had always been calm and collected, twitched his mouth violently and became flustered in the wind. Chapter 190. This little brat actually called his biological mommy pretty sister? Yun Tianyu, who had always been calm and collected, twitched his mouth violently and became flustered in the wind. Then, based on this logic, what should this little lad call him? In his mind, he could not help but picture little Li Chen standing in front of him, bashful and childish as he called out to him, Uncle. Yun Tianyu felt as if he had been struck by a landmine. Why was his brother so stupid? He really despised him. Compared to Xiao Chen, he despised Mu Yaja even more. They had the same genes, so why was his brother's IQ worrying? In a way, Yun Tianyu could be said to be the high IQ pillar of the family of four, holding up the average IQ. His thoughts paused for a moment and he harshly reprimanded himself for letting his imagination run wild. What family of four? He did not acknowledge his father and brother. His family only had his mommy and him. The rest did not count. Lu Jingtian was caught off guard by Xiao Yichen's words. Her face darkened and she was embarrassed. She even forgot to cry and could only laugh awkwardly. Deep down, she hated this child, who had appeared out of nowhere, to the core. If it were any other child, she would have long flared up. Alas, the one standing before her was Mu Yichen, the young master of the Mu group. Standing behind him was her beloved, Mu Yaja. No matter what, she had to be gentler to this child. The Mu family's love for this child was self-evident. What if she had to get along with him after marrying into the Mu family? She had to make this child like her, lest he become an obstacle to her marrying into the Mu family. She could only bear with the pain and smilingly said, "Baby Xiao Yichen, you must have seen wrongly. How could I do such a despicable thing?" Xiao Yichen looked at her with disdain and complained in his childish voice, "Daddy taught me since I was young that a man should be upright and take responsibility for his words. I'm not lying, it's clearly you who stretched out your leg to trip this pretty sister." Yun Tianyu almost fell to the ground. This child looked cold on the surface, but when he spoke, it was as if he was in kindergarten. He thought that he had also inherited excellent genes and was as smart as him. He covered his face silently. Li Hanlin nodded. "That's right. That's more like a 6-year-old kid. President Yun, your IQ and EQ are already heaven-defying." Xiao Yichen's words stirred up a commotion among the guests. Children's words are never fake. Moreover, for a prestigious family like the Mu group, their upbringing must be very strict. Young Master Mu would never lie. That's right. I also think that Lu Jingtian is targeting Yun Shishir. It's inevitable for women to be jealous. Yun Shishir is so glamorous tonight. She must have stolen the limelight from many people. Some people have been unhappy for a long time. They must want to see her embarrassed. Newcomers are always oppressed, especially newcomers like Yun Shishir who haven't debuted yet. It's natural for her to be ostracized. I really feel sorry for her. Lu Jingtian was on the verge of tears. I didn't. Chapter 191. Xiao Yichen suddenly pointed at the camera at the side. I see that this camera is facing you. Play the video back, and the truth will be revealed. With that, the little lad mysteriously pointed at Lu Jingtian and pretended to be cool. There is only one truth. After saying this, he actually raised his chin in self-satisfaction, thinking that he had said something cool. Everyone fell silent. Even Yun Shishir was stunned by Xiao Yichen's amusing act. Mu Yaja could no longer maintain his calm composure, and his lips curled into a smile for some reason. Upstairs, Yun Tianyu was completely petrified. Is he joking? Gu Xingzi let out a pft as he was amused by Xiao Yichen's amusing look. Ha ha ha. The guests were also tickled by the little guy's adorable side. Yun Shishir, who was standing among the crowd, looked at Xiao Yichen. She wanted to laugh, but she could not bring herself to do so. This child was actually helping her. This was something she did not expect. Ever since this child was born, the mother and son had never seen each other. However, there seemed to be a faint bond between them. After all, blood was thicker than water, it was a bond that could not be erased. Could this be considered telepathy? What did this child call her just now? Pretty sister? Yun Shishir could not help chuckling. When she first saw this child, he had an arrogant and cold expression, which was exactly the same as Mu Yaja's impression of him. He seemed unapproachable, but she did not expect him to have such an adorable side. Even though he and Yu were identical twins, their personalities were very different. Yu was a very gentle child. He was innocent, romantic, adorable, and heartwarming. Occasionally, he would show an astonishing maturity that made people want to rely on him. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, seemed to have inherited more of Mu Yaja's genes. On the surface, he looked deep and cold, but he could also reveal a rare adorable side. In life, he must be a very clever child, right? She had missed 6 years of his life, which was one of her biggest regrets. For a moment, the awkward atmosphere was diluted. Gu Xingzi smiled as he secretly signaled his assistant with a look. The assistant beside him immediately understood and hurried forward to help the woman up, intending to take her to the infirmary. Lu Jingtian was throwing a tantrum, but Gu Xingzi's assistant had his ways of calming her down with just a few words. "Miss Lu, do you really want to make a big fuss? The camera was on just now. If you rewind it, you can clearly see what you did just now. Coincidentally, I also saw that scene just now. Xingzi is just giving you a way out so that you can lie low for a while." After a pause, she asked, "There are so many people here. Do you have to embarrass yourself?" She was at a loss for words. "I just can't stand her. Why should everyone revolve around her? Miss Yunshishi is Xingzi's female companion at tonight's gala. He values her very much. Yet, you're making trouble for her. What are you doing to him?" "I have no intention of targeting Brother Xingzi. He's just giving Director Lu face. Don't do this again next time." "Sorry." She finally calmed down and allowed the assistant to help her to the infirmary. This storm had finally come to an end. Chapter 192. In the infirmary, Gu Xingzi's assistant, Jianghu, helped Lu Jingtian into the room. The bed closest to the door was covered in blood. On the bed lay an unconscious woman. Jianghu was shocked by this terrifying scene. What's wrong with this person?" She did not recognize the poor woman in front of her because the person on the bed was already beyond recognition. She did not recognize her, but Lu Jingtian knew who she was. Was it not her fault that Yunna ended up in this state? Her face was covered in blood. Even though they had taken measures to stop the bleeding, blood still seeped out of the wound. It was a horrible sight. The infirmary had only done some simple treatment. In a situation like Yunna's, she still needed to be admitted to the hospital for treatment. Her face was beyond recognition. She was really beyond recognition. For a woman, her life would be completely ruined if her face was in such a state. A cocktail party had completely ruined her bright future. Lu Jingtian had been heavy-handed, but she did not expect this to happen in a fit of anger. For a moment, she was a little shocked and regretful. Therefore, when she pushed the door open and saw Yunna's miserable appearance, she felt a little guilty. She did not mean to hurt her, but this woman was too shameless. In her anger, she lost her mind. By the time she came back to her senses, her face was already disfigured. Although the eyebrow shaver was small, it was sharp enough. The wound on her face was not deep, but there was a lot of blood. More than a dozen scratches were densely packed and crisscrossed, making it look shocking. However, she had already called her father. Soon, he would send someone over to deal with this matter. When the matter was exposed, at most, they would have to compensate a few 100,000 yuan, appease the family's emotions, and suppress the limelight. This matter would be over just like that. If Yunna wanted to make a big deal out of this matter, she could bribe a substitute to take the blame for her, and this matter would end there. It was easy to deal with a person without power or influence. Lu Jingtian said to Jianghu, "Please call an ambulance for me. This place is too disgusting. I can't stay here any longer." "All right." Jianghu did not know that there was something fishy about this matter, so she called an ambulance for her. She walked out of the door and dialed the emergency number. Lu Jingtian's foot must have been fractured. Jianghu knew this in her heart. With such high heels, it would be strange if he wasn't crippled. Once there was no one else in the room, she boldly walked to the bed and lifted the person on it with the tip of her foot. When there was no response, she frowned, a little worried that the person might die. She remembered kicking this woman's vitals several times when she was teaching her a lesson. Could she be dead? She stretched out her hand and checked her breathing. Only when she sensed her rapid breathing did she heave a sigh of relief. Bitch, don't blame me for being ruthless. You deserve it. Just as she finished speaking, she wanted to withdraw her hand, but her wrist was suddenly held tightly by that blood-stained hand. Lu Jingqian's eyes widened in shock. The person on the bed suddenly opened his eyes. His face was ferocious and his eyes were wide open. His eyes were red as if they were filled with blood. He was like a malicious spirit from purgatory. It was extremely terrifying. I will kill you. I'll kill you. Yun Na seemed to have woken up from a nightmare. She gripped Lu Jingqian's wrist tightly and cursed through gritted teeth. I won't let you off even if I become a ghost. Ah. Chapter 193. Let go. D****. Lu Jingtian was so frightened that she raised her hand to slap Yun Na. Only then did she manage to break free from the latter's grasp and limp out of the door in a panic. She bumped into Jianghu, who had just contacted the emergency center. Seeing her flustered look, Jianghu asked curiously, "What's wrong? Hurry up and send me to the hospital." Even though Jianghu found her odd, she did not want to probe further. Some things were not good to know too much. The vintage palace-style banquet hall, with its exquisite murals and richly ornamented ceiling, gave one the illusion of being in a luxurious palace. After the opening speech by several heavyweight guests from Huanyu Entertainment, it was time for the ball. In the hall, elegant music filled the air. After experiencing all the previous incidents, Han Yuyan and Yang Mi finally behaved themselves. They were considered veteran artists and naturally knew how to act according to the occasion. Hence, they did not make things difficult for Yun Shishir again. Lin Fengtian arrived late. The moment he entered the venue, he was surrounded by female stars, who took turns to flatter and toast him, all for the sake of befriending him. After putting in a lot of effort, Zhang Xian's good mood was ruined. Yun Shishir walked over leisurely with Gu Xingze on her arm. Lin Fengtian's eyes lit up when he saw them, and he exclaimed, "Shishir. Oh, gosh. You're so beautiful tonight." The two producers behind him and the assistant director in charge of casting were also stunned by her beauty, and they were not stingy with their compliments. "Thank you for your praise, Director Lin. Producer Li, Director Mong, nice to meet you." Yun Shishir greeted them with a polite smile. "Miss Yun, you remember our names?" Producer Li was a little surprised, and a look of admiration appeared on his face. You and Director Mong were also present during the audition. It's polite to remember the names of the judges. Director Mong laughed. "Director Lin, you have a good eye for talent. This newbie is very humble and polite. With her beauty and talent, she'll definitely have a bright future." "That's right. When have the people I've chosen ever disappointed you?" Lin Fengtian asked back proudly. Gu Xingze smiled and said, "Shishir is a very polite girl. I like that very much." "I like it too." She did not know why, but her face was inexplicably flushed red. Yes. This was a very good point. Unlike some newbies who think they have good resources and don't take others seriously. Director Mong suddenly changed the topic. "But Miss Yun, let me tell you, if you want to be in Director Lin's film, you have to be mentally prepared." Director Lin was famous for being harsh and picky when it came to filming. Before Han Yuyan became famous, she had appeared in one of his shows and was scolded to tears. TSK. He's known as the devil director in the circle. Who knows how many beautiful girls he's ruined. Gu Xingze shook his head helplessly. "Yeah, I've also been scolded by Director Lin." "Huh?" Yun Shishir was shocked. "Xingze, your acting has always been good." Gu Xingze pursed his lips and smiled without saying a word. Director Mong laughed and said, Xianxia had just debuted not long ago. When he appeared in director Lin's show, he was also scolded badly because of one look. Lin Fengtian snorted coldly. Xianxia is so popular now. Doesn't he have to thank me for recognizing his talent? Chapter 194. Director Lin is very strict when it comes to filming. It's out of respect for his career. When it comes to acting, you have to be strict in order to make a good movie, Unspoken said. Everyone looked at each other and exchanged knowing glances. This newcomer was really good and they all approved of her. After the greetings, Xianxia pulled Unspoken aside and gently whispered in her ear, "Xianxia, let's go dance." "But I don't know how to dance. If I don't dance well, it'll be embarrassing." Unspoken was a little scared. Xianxia winked at her mysteriously. "Why? Don't you believe in Teacher Gu's teachings?" Without any explanation, he held her hand and walked to the center of the dance floor. He taught her the basic gestures and rhythm of the dance. Then, he held her waist and gently held her hand. Unspoken also followed his instructions and placed her hand on his shoulder. Their arrival attracted the attention of countless people. The man's handsomeness and the woman's beauty seemed to condense into the most moving picture in the world. At this moment, it made the surrounding area lose its color. Unspoken felt the gazes on them and couldn't help but become more timid. "Xianxia, don't be afraid. Follow the rhythm." In the VIP seats, Wuxia held a wine glass in one hand and his cold gaze fell on the couple in the middle of the dance floor. His eyes slowly condensed into a vicious fog and the joints of his fingers holding the wine glass gradually stiffened. Xiao Yichen sat at the side and stared fixedly at Xianxia and Unspoken. He didn't know why, but he inexplicably felt that this man was very annoying. He hugged his arms angrily and his handsome little face was full of indignation. Let's go dance too." Wuxia walked over and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Okay." Wuxia pondered for a moment and held her hand. The moment they stepped onto the dance floor, all the guests in the hall focused their attention on them. Compared to Unspoken's clumsiness, who only knew some simple dance steps, Wuxia and Wuxuan's dance was more magnificent. As an upper-class noble, they had been taught from a young age that bearing and dancing were important and inseparable. The elegant dance steps were in tune with the brisk melody, and the exquisite suit set off the man's tall and slender figure. Wuxia's graceful dance was captivating. "Oh my God, Chairman Mu is so handsome. As expected of the richest family in the capital, even their dancing is so outstanding. His face is like a god's, how can it be so perfect? Boo-hoo. I'm so jealous of the woman beside him. I also want to dance with him." "Ha! You? Who are you? Stop daydreaming, it won't be your turn." Unspoken couldn't help but be distracted. She glanced at Wuxia from the corner of her eye, and her expression couldn't help but wander and drift. She was looking at him, but he wasn't looking at her. His handsome side profile looked so arrogant and unapproachable. She accidentally stepped on the tip of Xianxia's shoe. She exclaimed and looked up apologetically. Her face instantly turned red. "I'm sorry. It hurts, Xianxia." Xianxia raised his eyebrows helplessly. "Where are you looking? Dancing requires full concentration. Otherwise, you'll mess up the dance steps." She nodded absent-mindedly, but she didn't seem to have any intention of continuing the dance. Her heartbeat was suddenly disrupted. Chapter 195. It was as if her entire focus had been taken away by that man. In a moment of absent-mindedness, she accidentally repeated the same mistake. History was repeating itself. Unspoken lowered her head and looked at Xianxia's handmade leather shoes that she had trampled on twice. The guilt in her eyes seemed to overflow. "Xianxia, you're distracted." Xianxia frowned and slowed down the rhythm. I didn't," she weakly defended herself. She was also very upset. Why was she suddenly distracted? The scene of Mu Yaja and Mu Wanru dancing together just now was like a thorn that pierced her heart. It was painful and itchy. Shishir looked up and was still fretting over how to explain herself. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw Mu Yaja holding Mu Wanru's hand and approaching her. Before she could be surprised, she saw Mu Yaja's hand gently push Mu Wanru's waist. He naturally reached out to take Shishir's left hand and pulled her into his embrace. Before Mu Wanru could react, she was instantly pushed to Gu Xingzi's side. When she finally came back to her senses, she saw that Mu Yaja had already walked to the center of the dance floor with Shishir. In a fit of anger, she couldn't flare up on the spot. After all, there were many important guests present. She had no choice but to reluctantly maintain her smile. She turned to look at Gu Xingzi and extended her hand. However, Gu Xingzi didn't look at her. Instead, he stared coldly in the direction of Mu Yaja and Shishir. His expression was slowly freezing. Xingzi, Mu Wanru couldn't help but feel a little awkward. In any case, let this dance continue. Otherwise, how embarrassing would it be to be abandoned by one's dance partner on the dance floor? Especially when she was at the peak of everyone's attention just now. Now that she was abandoned, if she were to leave with her tail between her legs, she would definitely be laughed at by everyone. She was a little anxious and urged, Xingzi. Gu Xingzi turned around with a cold face. He looked at Mu Wanru's stiff hand in the air and her eyes that were constantly hinting at him. He said expressionlessly, "Forgive me for not accompanying you." With that, he left the dance floor without looking back, leaving Mu Wanru in the same spot, not knowing whether to move or not to move. What was the meaning of this? Was she trying to embarrass her on purpose? It was as if they could hear the merciless mockery from the guests. I've been abandoned, so the so-called young Madame Mu is nothing more than this. Shishir is more beautiful than her. Any man would be willing to dance with such a beautiful woman. Sigh, poor her. After all, she's still CEO Mu's fiancée. She's just a fiancée. They're not even officially married. It's just a title. She can be abandoned at any time. Those sarcastic and mean whispers and merciless mockery pierced her heart in an instant. Mu Wanru kicked Shishir's back view with a gloomy face. Shishir. At this moment, all the guests on the dance floor stopped dancing. Some of them were envious, and some of them were stunned. They were mesmerized by the couple dancing in the middle of the dance floor. The beautiful and eye-catching scene really made the world lose its color. Mu Yaja's dance was very elegant. She didn't know what skill he used, but Shishir, who was still a little slow in the hands of Gu Xingzi, seemed to be enlightened in front of him. Whether it was the dance steps or the melody, it was perfect. Chapter 196. Mu Wanru clenched her fists tightly. She wished she could cut this Shishir into pieces right now. Seeing her standing there alone, Alan immediately walked forward. As soon as he reached her side, he could easily smell the gorgeous fragrance on her body. In an instant, his mind was stirred up. The scene from before suddenly appeared in his mind. In the assistant's office of Disheng Financial Group, he had taken advantage of her to his heart's content. The carefree feeling of being in perfect harmony with her was unforgettable. For so many years, his feelings for her seemed to only exist in his fantasies. That day, all his dreams finally came true. The nervousness and excitement of having an affair stimulated his hormones to the extreme, and he finally stopped restraining himself. Unfortunately, after that, Mu Wanru was lukewarm toward him. She even ignored him. He tried all sorts of ways to get close to her, but she always found all sorts of reasons to avoid meeting him. That day's incident seemed to be the end of their incestuous relationship. Alan had mocked her more than once. Did she not care about him now that he was no longer of any use to her? "Madam. If you don't mind, I'll dance with you." He was being kind and wanted to ease her awkward situation. Being abandoned by Chairman Mu on the dance floor and Gu Xingzi ignoring her, she must be in a very awkward situation. What dance? I'm not dancing anymore. Mu Wanru angrily turned to leave the dance floor. Aaron chased after her with a nervous look on his face. Don't follow me, she said angrily, driving him away mercilessly. Madam, Mu Wanru walked to a secluded corner and suddenly turned around to glare at him. Go away, don't bother me. Wanru. Alan mustered up his courage and grabbed her wrist in a corner of the corridor. He did not let go. Mu Wanru was slightly taken aback by his overly intimate form of address. Her heart skipped a beat before she reacted and turned around to give him a slap. Slap. It was a crisp and clear sound. Why are you calling my name? Are you afraid that others can't hear you? Aren't you afraid of gossip? Alan said confidently, I'm not afraid. I'm afraid. Mu Wanru tried her best to suppress her anger and pretended to be calm. Alan, you have to know who you are. I'm still Chairman Mu's fiancé, and you're my fiancé's assistant. Please show some respect. Alan stared at her, but he didn't say anything for a long time. His eyes were burning. Let go. You. Let go of me. Mu Wanru panicked. She reached out her hand to break free. Her face was filled with anger. What do you want? Ellen said with a lonely expression, Are you going to cut ties with me now? What do you take me for? As if struck by lightning, Mu Wanru immediately requested, that matter, please forget about it. Forget? It clearly happened, so how could I pretend to have lost my memory? Wanru, you enjoyed it that day too, didn't you? You're not pretending, are you? You want me too, don't you? Alan asked again and again. His explicit words made Mu Wanru's heart jump. Stop talking. She wanted to give him another slap until he woke up. Although she was Mu Yaja's fiancée, it was only in name. Not to mention bed matters, even basic intimacy was very rare. She was also a woman. Naturally, she also had needs and needs to vent in terms of men and women. That day, she really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure that she had not tasted for many years. It made her body and mind sink. Chapter 197. After he confirmed the destruction of Yun Shishir and Yun Tianyo's information, she gave him the cold shoulder and avoided him, pretending that the incident that day did not exist. He asked bitterly, Are you abandoning me now that I'm no longer of any use to you? Or is it that my feelings aren't firm enough and you don't believe me? Shut up. Mu Wanru said helplessly, I can't leave him, just give up. There's no possibility between us. Their relationship was nothing more than a love that could not see the light of day. Although it had already sprouted, she wanted to strangle it in the cradle. Wanru, I've never asked for a status. I only want to be with you. Even if it can't see the light of day, I'm not afraid. It's not like you haven't seen Mu Yaja's methods. Are you really willing to betray him for me? Mu Wanru's expression changed. She had clearly thought of something. This Aaron was still useful to her. She might as well make use of him a few more times. Yun Shishir had not been completely eradicated yet, and she was lacking manpower. Alan confessed affectionately. For you, I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and plunge into a sea of fire. Even if I have to tread on fire, I'm willing to do so. Really? Mu Wanru's eyes flashed. She gave a sinister smile and pretended to be weak. Are you really willing to do anything for me? Yes. Yes. He nodded heavily. That's great. Mu Wanru said hatefully, Yun Shishir has always been a thorn in my side. Get rid of her for me, I want her to be utterly ruined. Blood flashed in his eyes. He looked like a servant bewitched by a demoness. Even if there was a bottomless abyss in front of him, he would not hesitate to risk his life for her. Wanru, what should I do? What do you want me to do? Tonight, the company's top management wants to see her. Help me send this woman to Director Li's bed. Remember, you must do it flawlessly and cleanly. Aaron nodded heavily, his eyes showing determination. I'll make sure she has no chance to rise again. Mu Wanru said fiercely. She then smiled charmingly and pushed open the door of a suite. Leaning against the door, she hooked her finger at him. Alan walked over as if he was obsessed. Mu Wanru smiled mischievously. She reached out and hooked Alan's shoulder, leading him into the room. She turned around and saw the door close. Now, this room only belonged to them. The woman smiled coquettishly and held his shoulder. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his thin lips. Her breath was like orchids. Alan, hold me tight. Quick, she seemed a little impatient. Mu Yaja had never laid a finger on her. She had even suspected that he had some kind of hidden disease in that area. It wasn't until 6 years ago when that woman became pregnant with his child that she understood that he just didn't want to touch her. He must not have been mentally prepared, right? Mu Wanru was not willing to give up. She swore that she would win his heart sooner or later. She was determined to win this smokeless war between the rich and powerful. Under her encouragement, Alan became excited. It turned out that she really had him in her heart. She must have some feelings for him. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a second time. The two of them were completely immersed in a happy world. Outside the door, a man in a suit pressed the stop button on the recording pen in his hand when he heard a soft gasp coming from inside the room. He pushed the frame of his glasses up his nose. His handsome face was full of disgust and contempt. Boss is right. This Alan has long been rebellious. He played with the recording pen in his hand and sneered. Good evidence. Chapter 198. The music didn't stop in the middle of the dance floor. Mu Yaja held Yun Shishir's hand and danced to the elegant melody. His soul-stirring eyes were on her shy face and there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. She had been lowering her head from the beginning. Yun Shishir still couldn't forget what that man had done to her, so she was a bit absent-minded and didn't dare look up at his face. On the other hand, he always had an elegant and calm demeanor. His nonchalant expression made it seem as if everything was under his control. His desire to control was really strong, especially, Yun Shishir's face turned even redder at the thought of that charming scene. She gritted her teeth and wanted to shake his hand off and run away from him. He would always appear in her world without any explanation, provoking her and disturbing her mind. Then, with a leisurely attitude, he would wantonly enjoy her helplessness and panic. How could this man be so evil? She couldn't help being absent-minded and making mistakes in her dance steps. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her and lightly commented, "Miss Yun, your dancing is too stiff." Yun Shishir bit her lips and said, "I don't know how to dance. I only know some simple dance steps. You can laugh at me all you want." Mu Yaja raised a brow as his thin lips curled into a slight curve. "You're really covered in thorns. There's no soft spot on you. You're like a hedgehog." "I'm a hedgehog," Yun Shishir said. "I'm fully armed to protect myself." Protecting herself would also hurt the person who really wanted to love her. The man looked at her. She seemed to have restrained her sharpness, but her eyes were staring at him warily, as if she was alert that he was doing something bad to her so she could fight back immediately. She was really like a little mommy covered in injuries, always staring at anyone who wanted to get close to her. Her eyes were filled with uneasiness, bewilderment, and wariness. A woman who was both stubborn and fragile at the same time. What a contradiction. Relax and follow the rhythm. Dancing is easy. On the second floor, Yun Tianyu was so angry that he stomped Li Hanlin's foot when he saw this scene. The latter picked him up with a bitter face and said aggrievedly, "Director Yun, you can't just stomp on me to vent your anger. This man is obviously wooing my mommy. I won't allow it, I won't allow it." He wanted to stop this man. His mommy was his and his alone. How could he allow anyone to barge into their world and call himself king? Usually, Yun Tianyu was unruffled as if everything was under his control. However, when it came to his mommy, he always lost control. In front of outsiders, he could be indifferent and calm. However, in front of Yun Shishir, he was just a little lad who had yet to grow up and was only willing to be his mommy's warm little jacket. Director Yun, please calm down. In the VIP seats, Xiao Yichen downed an entire glass of fruit juice. He was clearly feeling down. Looking at Yun Shishir, who was in the middle of the dance floor, he wished that he could grow up quickly and become a tall man like his daddy so that he could dance with this beautiful sister. Chapter 199. His thoughts seemed to be drawn as those fragmented dreams flashed in his mind. In his dreams, he seemed to see a little boy who was about the same age as him. His facial features were exactly the same as his, with soft hair and handsome eyebrows. However, that delicate and pretty face seemed a little indifferent. In his dreams, he was always standing far away from him with a cold face. With his back facing him, he walked forward silently. The images were so real that they seemed to be within reach. He always chased after him recklessly, but no matter how he walked or ran, he could not catch up. As he walked further and further away, he woke up from his dreams in fear. When he woke up, his whole body was covered in cold sweat. The realistic dream made him feel as if he had overdrawn his energy. There were a few times when he dreamt that the little boy was lying on a bed. His soul seemed to have been substituted into this body, and he could not move. A woman sat by the bed. The outline of her face was indistinct, and he could not see it clearly. He could only vaguely make out her gentle eyes. She kept caressing his face, and her eyes were as gentle as water. That dream was long and torturous. When he woke up, he felt that his limbs were extremely heavy and his head was dizzy. The family doctor diagnosed him with a high fever for no apparent reason. Coming back to his senses, Xiao Yichen stared fixedly at Yun Tianyu's face. That face overlapped with that of the child in his dreams. "It's you!" he cried out in surprise. His voice was not loud, so it was quickly drowned out by the dance music. However, as if he had telepathy, the boy turned to look at him, only to see him nimbly climbing up the stairs with his short legs and running toward him. Yun Tianyu was startled. What was this little rascal doing here? Was he here to look for him? "Director Yun, that young Master Mu seems to be looking for you." Yun Tianyu could not see him, but with his height advantage, Li Hanlin could easily see Xiao Yichen's figure running up the stairs and chasing after Yun Tianyu. "Let's go, ignore him." With that, Yu turned to leave. Li Hanlin followed closely behind him with nimble footsteps. Seeing this, Xiao Yichen panted and reached out his hand. Don't run." Why was he running? He was not a ghost. Was he avoiding him? Xiao Yichen stomped his feet in dissatisfaction and continued chasing after Yu. Yu had amazing stamina, but when he turned back and saw Xiao Yichen catching up to him, his expression changed. "Short legs, you run pretty fast." Li Hanlin held his little hand and said helplessly, "Why must we run, President Yun?" "I don't want to see him," Yun Tianyu replied snappily. "I don't want to acknowledge him as my brother." "How stupid. I find L." Li Hanlin broke out in a cold sweat and didn't say anything else. Yun Tianyu did not sleep well last night, so he was panting from running. He suddenly said, "Agent Li, carry me." Hearing this, Li Hanlin bent over and lifted him over his head. Yun Tianyu naturally sat on his shoulders, grabbed his ears, and ordered seriously, "Run faster and shake him off." Li Hanlin had the height advantage, after all. Every step he took with his long legs was equivalent to Xiao Yichen taking 3 steps. In less than 10 seconds, he had shaken him off. Xiao Yichen stood on the spot with a gloomy face. Panting, he put his hands on his waist and stomped his feet angrily. "Ugh! I lost him. Who was that little boy? Chapter 200. Boss, I've done as you instructed. In the VIP seats, a man in a suit stood respectfully beside Wuxia and handed him an exquisite recording pen. He cocked a brow and glanced at the man from the corner of his eyes. Which room is it? 208. Ha. Wuxia kept the recording pen in his suit pocket as his thin lips curled into a cold smile. This small fish has taken the bait, but the big fish hasn't made a move yet. He picked up a glass of wine and swirled the scarlet liquid in it. His voice was languid and deep. This big fish has been waiting for a few years. It's about time for it to come out of the water, right? The man nodded. Now that the people in the conglomerate are unpredictable, the board of directors is, Chairman Mu. A crisp voice interrupted the man's words. Wuxia looked up unhappily and saw Tang Yu shyly walking toward him with a glass of wine in her hand. Emboldened by the alcohol, she tried to get closer to him. Chairman Mu, why are you sitting here alone? Isn't young Mistress Mu by your side? As she spoke, a smile bloomed on her face that she thought was charming. She swayed her seductive body and sat down beside him. The shoulder straps of her gown unknowingly slid down her shoulders, revealing her fair and charming neck. She drank a little wine, which naturally boosted her courage. She saw Wuxia inviting Xianxia to a dance earlier. It turned out that he was not that unattainable. If Xianxia could be his dance partner, there were naturally women who could be his bed partner, too. If she could climb into his bed, would she not be able to fly to the top in the future? She was confident in herself. She was young, beautiful, and most importantly, had a good figure. Many big bosses liked her, but she was not interested in their status. She was not that ambitious. In other words, unlike Lu Jingtian, she did not want to marry into a rich family. She only wanted to use Wuxia's power to climb up the social ladder quickly. She had been in the entertainment industry for a long time, but she had always been suppressed by Yang Mi. Yang Chang had a sugar daddy supporting her, but what about her? Tang Yu had always wanted to find someone with a high net worth to secure her position in the circle. Therefore, she targeted Wuxia. Tang Yu sat down beside him as if there was no one else around. Now that Mu Wanru was not around, she was even more relaxed. Her every movement was full of charm. Chairman Mu, is no one drinking with you? Wuxia looked at her, his thin lips pursed and his face expressionless. The man beside her wanted to chase her away, but Wuxia raised his hand to stop him. The man was slightly surprised. Seeing this, Tang Yu was overjoyed. This meant, could it be that Wuxia was interested in her? Thinking of this possibility, Tang Yu couldn't wait to hug him passionately. Chairman Mu, why aren't you saying anything? How about I have a drink with you? Her coquettish words gave people goosebumps all over. Alas, Wuxia was very calm. He flirted with her hair and played with it with his fingers. Is there anyone booking you tonight? No. Chairman Mu, do you mean? Her heart thumped wildly, and she was extremely nervous. Looking at him up close, she was surprised to find him so handsome. She was over the moon at the thought of this man being interested in her. Wuxia smiled. Accompany me tonight, then. Chapter 201. Unknowingly, half of the banquet was already over. The media had already cleared the venue, and the reporters had all gone home to prepare tomorrow's headlines. At this moment, the entire venue seemed to have shed its dignified disguise, as if a mask had been removed, revealing the drunken state of the party. It was as if the real cocktail party had just begun, and the real theme had officially begun. There was no lack of powerful and influential people attending this cocktail party. With the help of the alcohol, they all began to search for prey on the scene. At this moment, many female artistes who could not hold their liquor were already tipsy. There was no room for discussion. As long as they picked someone, they would immediately take them away. Many newcomers were ignorant of the ways of the world. After drinking a few glasses of specially prepared wine, they were completely drunk. Yang Mi was also drunk. She leaned against Li Jiuxian, and their faces were very close to each other. Without the presence of the media, she was much bolder. She intimately hugged Li Jiuxian's shoulder and whispered into his ear. Han Yuyan glanced at them and secretly used her phone to capture a few images. Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian were rumored to have fallen in love with each other. However, both of them denied their relationship, saying that it was just a media hype. However, in reality, relationships between men and women in this industry were not that simple. There were many who were too immersed in their roles and turned the fake into reality. However, if Yang Mi admitted her relationship, it would be a huge blow to her popularity. She was not stupid. She was just using Li Jiuxian's great momentum to hype herself up. In a quiet VIP area, Unspoken leaned on the sofa. Her entire vision was a little blurry. She did not drink much tonight, but her alcohol tolerance was shockingly low. After taking a sip, her entire face flushed red. After drinking a glass, her vision was spinning. When she came down from the dance floor, Lin Fengtian led a few investors over to her and asked her to propose a toast. Unspoken did not dare to refuse. She naturally trusted Lin Fengtian's character. Hence, she did not drink a glass of wine. It was just a glass, but she was already swaying left and right. When Lin Fengtian saw this, he was so shocked that his face turned pale. He thought that Unspoken would be able to drink a little. He did not expect her to be so drunk after just one glass. He quickly helped her to the side and called for Qin Zhou. Qin Zhou was originally drinking for Gu Xingzi. Just when he was in full swing, Lin Fengtian ran over and told him that Unspoken was drunk. He rolled his eyes. No way. Is her alcohol tolerance that bad? He looked defeated. His life as a manager was really tough. Not only was Gu Xingzi not a good drinker, but he also had to help Unspoken clean up the mess. He sighed, but there was nothing he could do. Qin Zhou was very fond of Unspoken, so he rushed over. Sure enough, she was in a daze. Let's send her back first. Lin Fengtian, who was standing at the side, lost his temper and was speechless. Alright, Director Lin, I'll have to trouble you to help me deal with this. Lin Fengtian waved his hand disdainfully at him. Qin Zhou walked out of the hotel with Unspoken in his arms. A man who looked like a concierge immediately came forward and said enthusiastically, "Sir, would you like me to arrange a special car for you?" "Yes. Hurry up and arrange a car to send this lady home." Qin Zhou nodded and did not think much of it. The concierge immediately took out his walkie-talkie and seemed to be making arrangements for him. Chapter 202. The car arrived quickly. It was a black Santana. Qin Zhou was about to help Unspoken into the car, but he was stopped by the concierge. "What's wrong?" Qin Zhou frowned, feeling that something was amiss. The concierge smiled and said politely, "Sir, let me send this lady to the car." "May I ask where she lives?" Qin Zhou glanced at him and smiled playfully. "The service is so good?" "Of course." Qin Zhou looked down at the unconscious Unspoken in his arms and felt a little worried. If possible, it would be best to send her back personally. He was still a little worried about her. However, the service of the Imperial Palace Hotel was first class. He naturally trusted it and didn't suspect anything. He had seen her resume and knew where she lived, so he gave him the address. "Then you can send her home personally. Golden Star City International Apartment. When you reach the door, please help this lady upstairs." The concierge bowed elegantly. "It's my honor. I will send this lady home safely." Qin Zhou handed her over to him. The concierge helped Unspoken into the back seat, closed the door, and sat in the front passenger seat. However, at an angle that Qin Zhou couldn't see clearly, he handed a business card to the driver. "Go here." On the business card, it was West Taihu Villa District, the residence of Huanyu's high-ranking director Li. The latter understood tacitly and naturally understood that the woman sitting in the back row had been chosen by some big shot. The Santana left. Qin Zhou looked at the black car in the distance and felt a little uneasy. He regretted that he should have sent her back personally. However, there were still a few brands waiting for him to negotiate at the banquet. One of the endorsements was the highlight of the night. He must be thinking too much. From the driver to Li Bin, they were all people from the Imperial Palace Hotel. What trouble could there be? Qin Zhou took a deep breath and turned back to the hotel. The black car drove quickly on the road, and the street outside the window flashed by at high speed. It was extremely thrilling. The concierge sitting in the front passenger seat suddenly took out his phone and dialed a number. On the other end, a man's voice came, "How's it going?" "Mr. Allen, Miss Xianxia is already in the car. Please don't worry, we will do as you say." Allen warned, "Don't give anything away. Clean it up." "Yes." The concierge hung up the phone and looked at the person in the back seat. He saw Xianxia leaning against the car window with her eyebrows knitted. She was obviously uncomfortable. On the other end, Aaron hung up the call and turned his head. He saw Mu Wanru standing in front of the dressing mirror, meticulously applying her makeup. She didn't even turn her head as she asked, "Has everything been arranged properly?" "Yes, Wanru, don't worry. I've already made the arrangements. There won't be any problems. When the time comes, contact with the press to tell them that there's a big story tonight. By tomorrow, the scandal about her will be all over the place." Mu Wanru smiled with a vicious glint in her eyes. The new generation of Phoenix Girl actually slept with a sugar daddy and climbed to the top through unspoken rules. "Aaron, what do you think of this headline? This is truly flawless." Alan walked over and planted a kiss on her forehead. Mu Wanru responded enthusiastically, smiling coquettishly. "Aaron, your performance today was amazing." Chapter 203. Ai Luan, you did great today. In what way? Ai Luan was in a good mood and teased her. "In bed, and, haha." Mu Wanru poked his chest with her slender finger, her expression ambiguous. Ai Luan was attracted by her seductive look and couldn't help but lean on her again. "Wanru. Can I have more?" "No. You're too greedy. You're too greedy. You've already taken me twice. Stop messing around." Okay, I'll stop." Ai Luan let go of her obediently. Mu Wanru stood up. Under her meticulous makeup, she still looked elegant and noble. "Xianxia, let's see where you can escape tonight." On the way, the Santana sped all the way to the West Taihu Lake Villa. However, at some point in time, the car's headlights kept flashing, piercing their eyes. The loud roar of the sports car lingered in their ears like an angry lion, roaring and glaring at them. "What's wrong with this car? It's been chasing us since just now." The driver adjusted the angle of the rearview mirror, and the long shots behind him kept flashing, almost blinding him. It was a limited edition Bugatti Veyron worth tens of millions. Its price was self-evident. "Don't worry about him. Just drive your car." The concierge didn't care about anything else and ordered the driver to drive. Behind them, the sports car's horn was blaring. Seeing that the Santana didn't show any signs of stopping, the Bugatti Veyron stepped on the accelerator, changed lanes, and overtook the Santana easily. It drifted in front and stopped in the middle of the road, blocking the driver's way. The driver was shocked and quickly stepped on the brakes, stopping a few feet away from the sports car. He was so shocked that he froze in his seat, his forehead covered in cold sweat. The concierge was also shocked. However, before they could react, the car door in front of them opened. A tall man was closing in against the moonlight. The driver was full of questions. "Who's this? Who knows? I don't know him either." Wuxia walked to the side of the Santana and looked down at the back seat. Yunshurshu was leaning against the seat in a daze. Her eyes were closed, and her brows were furrowed. She seemed to be enduring the discomfort. He raised his brows elegantly and his thin lips curled into a cold smile. The car window rolled down. The driver stuck his head out and scolded him. "Idiot, why are you blocking the road? Don't drag others into your death wish." The man ordered, "Unlock it." "Huh? Door, unlock." A stumbling figure came out of the sports car. Tang Yu got out of the car immediately after she got out of the car. She had drunk a lot of alcohol, and the car was speeding along the way. She even ran a few red lights. In order to maintain her image, she did not vomit in the car. "What are you doing? It can't be a robbery, right?" The driver was terrified. "But it's impossible. I've never seen anyone driving a car worth tens of millions to rob a Santana. What are you trying to do? My woman is in the car." The driver's lips twitched. "Are you kidding? Your woman? Who are you? I don't have much patience." 1, 2, in the silent night, the sound of a gun being loaded could be heard. The next second, the cold muzzle of a gun was pressed against the driver's forehead. The dark muzzle of the gun was emitting cold air. Chapter 204. The chauffeur's face was pale, and his lips were trembling in fear. Click. The car door was unlocked. Wuxia carried Yunshurshu, who was in a daze, out of the car. She was so thin that he could easily carry her in his arms with one hand. With the other hand, he carried Tang Yu over and pushed her into the car. With a bang, the car door was closed. The chauffeur was even more confused. "What's going on?" Wuxia said, "You got the wrong person. This woman is the one." The chauffeur was speechless. Tang Yu was thrown into the back seat by Wuxia. Then, the car door was locked. She couldn't open the car door, and she was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She was scared out of her wits. She didn't understand why Wuxia threw her into an unfamiliar car. She was so anxious that she hit the car door with all her might. With a ferocious face, she cried, "Chairman Mu, what do you mean by this? Why did you throw me into this car? Didn't I follow you tonight? Drive." Wuxia ignored her and said coldly to the chauffeur. As soon as he finished speaking, the chauffeur stepped on the accelerator as if he had been granted amnesty. He sped away with Tang Yu's screams. Poor Tang Yu. She was naive and delusional to think that she could hook up with Wuxia and rely on him. However, in Wuxia's eyes, she was a bait, and to put it bluntly, she was just a scapegoat. Not far away, a phaeton rushed over. Min Yu pushed the frame of his glasses up his nose and got out of the car. He saw Yunshurshu in Wuxia's arms. This woman seemed to be drunk and was now unconscious. She was leaning on the man's chest in a daze, and her body was moving around uneasily. He said softly, "Boss, this is Yunshurshu." Wuxia's eyes softened when he said her name. "So it's her." Min Yu exclaimed and praised from the bottom of his heart, "This woman is beautiful. She looks like she walked out of a painting." As soon as he finished speaking, Wuxia's expression changed, and he looked at him coldly. "Do I need you to judge me?" There was a dangerous look in his eyes, and Min Yu immediately broke out in cold sweat. The boss was very possessive. He had only taken a glance, but the boss was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey, as if guarding against his covetous intentions. How would he dare? However, he soon understood his boss's intention. At first, he thought that the boss was really interested in Tang Yu, but he didn't expect that Tang Yu was just a scapegoat. Two-faced, he was too two-faced. You can't offend the boss, or you won't even know how you died. Wuxia carried Yunshurshu to the back seat and closed the door. "Boss, where are you going?" Min Yu asked. "Go home." Mu Yaja said calmly. Min Yu knew very well that the home he was referring to was not the Mu residence. You're in charge of following up. Boss, don't worry. Mu Yaja replied calmly, then lowered his head to look at the drunken woman in his arms. At this moment, she was lying on his chest, her eyebrows slightly furrowed. Her eyelids drooped, and she narrowed them into slits. Her eyes were glittering, but her little mouth was pouting. She muttered softly, but her words were vague and intermittent, so he couldn't hear her clearly. Chapter 205. Her alcohol tolerance was really good. When she was drunk, she would curl up in a corner like a cat and curl up into a ball. One of the investors seemed to be interested in her. He sat beside her and stared at her like a cheetah eyeing its prey. He wanted to take action, but considering that Lin Fengtian was present, he didn't have the guts and could only watch. How could he not understand the man's thoughts? Such a tempting and delicious food was in front of him, but he couldn't touch it, or eat it. Naturally, his heart was itching. However, Lin Fengtian seemed to be very protective of her, so it wasn't easy to take action. However, this woman was really too precious. She was drunk to this extent with just a glass of wine. She dared to barge into such a luxurious cocktail party with this little bit of skill. To her, this place was no different from a dangerous wolf's den. Didn't she know that she was like a tender lamb? With displeasure, Mu Yaja ruffled her hair until it was a mess. Only then did he stop. Unspoken looked up unhappily and glared at him with her watery almond-shaped eyes. She raised her fists and punched his chest a few times. It looked like she had used some strength, but he felt that it wasn't even enough to tickle him. Oh, bad guy. Bad guy. Heh. This woman had become bolder. However, he was indeed a bad guy and had committed a heinous crime. That was because she hadn't seen him before. How could he be bad? The car stopped under the shade of the trees. Under the cover of the night, Mu Yaja suddenly smiled evilly and lifted her up to sit on his lap. His figure was so tall, and such a delicate girl was sitting on his lap in a daze. She was swaying from side to side, and the corners of her lips curled up in an intoxicated manner. From time to time, she would let out an innocent laugh. Her voice was so soft that it seeped into his bones. He enjoyed her enchanting drunkenness without restraint. Her original naivety faded away and added a bit of charm. She had a charming charm of a little woman. Mu Yaja reached out his hand and gently lifted her chin with one finger. His fingertip rubbed against her lips. Unspoken blinked her eyes and bit his fingertip. Her red lips gently sucked on it as her teeth rubbed against his knuckles with alternating heavy and light forces. His pupils dilated and he raised his eyebrows in shock. This kitten not only knew how to scratch people, but she also knew how to bite people. However, she was drunk after all, and her bite didn't hurt or itch. On the contrary, it stirred up his suppressed undercurrent. He wrapped his arms around her neck and lowered his head to kiss her little mouth. He casually swept his lips across hers, and the tip of his tongue slid into the gap between her lips. Unspoken pushed his shoulders repeatedly as if she had been startled. She clenched her fists and pounded on his shoulders. Her brows furrowed even deeper as she shook her head and murmured dreamily, "Don't. No. Let go of me." Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows in dissatisfaction. However, he heard a trace of panic in her voice as she kept saying, "You're a bad person. Don't touch me." Interesting. The man saw that she was easy to bully. He reached out and pinched the tip of her nose until she couldn't breathe. Then, he waved his hand in a flurry. Fun. As if he had found an interesting scene, Mu Yaja provocatively pinched her chin and then her cheeks. It was like a child playing with his beloved toy. Ah! Unspoken couldn't stand the disturbance. She angrily slapped away his mischievous hand. Chapter 206. Gu Xingzi. As soon as she said that, Mu Yaja's face suddenly darkened and turned cold. At that moment, the atmosphere seemed to have frozen over. It was as if the hot summer had suddenly fallen into 1,000 feet of ice. A trace of anger appeared on the man's somewhat displeased face. His pair of phoenix eyes that were as deep as the abyss were dyed with a bit of anger. Now, she was in his arms and calling out another man's name. To a proud man like Wuxia, this was undoubtedly a disguised provocation. She actually called out another man's name. This stupid woman. Whose name are you calling? He pinched her waist in anger. It was neither light nor hard, making her laugh foolishly. He. It's so ticklish. Don't bite me, Yunshirsher hugged his shoulders. Her bell-like laughter drifted in the wind like a pleasant wind chime. Did she think he was joking with her? Damn it! He suddenly grabbed her cheeks and used a bit of strength with his fingertips, deliberately pinching her to hurt her. Ah, it hurts, Yunshirsher cried out in pain. Because of the pain, she started to whimper like a kitten. She tried to struggle, but to no avail. She could only clench her hands into fists and swing them at his shoulders. However, her vision was blurry and her fists missed. Bastard! Let go of me. She bit her lips in grievance and helplessness. She twisted her body left and right, trying to break free. However, the man's strength was so great that she couldn't move at all. However, it didn't matter if she didn't move. Once she moved, their bodies would rub against each other and it would be hard to avoid a misfire. At this moment, due to her drunkenness, her body was boiling hot. Even through the gauze of her dress, he felt as if he was being ironed by her fiery skin. Unknowingly, his body was already drenched in sweat from trying to restrain himself. This woman didn't realize how terrible the consequences of her actions were. If she was sober, she would definitely see the man's handsome face right in front of her. It was terrifying. Who? The man forced her to raise her face and look him in the eye, his eyes glaring like a tiger. Whose name are you calling? Gu Xingzi. The little woman's eyes widened as she stared at him with an innocent and playful smile on her face. Suddenly, she reached out her hand and with a smack, she cupped his handsome face and rubbed it. What? Isn't that Gu Xingzi? Huff huff. His expression was blurred and intoxicated. It was obvious that he was quite drunk. However, he liked the way she looked when she was drunk. She was like a clingy kitten, snuggling into his arms, acting like a rascal and acting coquettishly as much as she wanted. It was as if his arms were her own world. That small face was truly captivating. Her charming eyes were like silk, and at this moment, her watery eyes were tainted with a bit of drunkenness. She looked at him with infatuation, as if she wanted to say something. That captivating charm made it seem as if water could drip out of her eyes. In the depths of her pupils, it was as if a charming flower had bloomed. What made him dissatisfied was that this woman seemed to be unable to recognize the situation in front of her, and even more unable to recognize who he was. Wuxia's cold eyes were filled with danger. Who am I? I don't know. Yunshirsher tried her best to pry his wrist away. She said pitifully, N. It hurts. Don't. Let go of me. Wuxia slowly narrowed his eyes. His face immediately darkened, and there was a faint murderous aura around him. Who am I? Ugh, Wuxia was angry. He lowered his head and almost fiercely bit her lips. She groaned in pain. She couldn't avoid it, and her whole body shivered. The lips were the softest part of the face, especially her lips. They were as fragile as cherry blossom petals, sparkling and moist, as if they could be broken by the slightest breeze. When he bit down, his strength was not small, leaving a shallow but sexy bite mark. Go away. Bastard. Bastard, she patted him on the shoulder and muttered in her sleep, obviously dissatisfied with his bullying. What a stupid woman. Was she drunk? Was he that drunk? That drunk? Was she so drunk that she didn't even know who was in front of her and whose arms she was in? It was him today, so she was safe and sound. But if he hadn't been alert enough, would she have known what would have happened next? Would she have expected it? Where was the Gu Xingzi that she missed so much? Would he be able to protect her? He sneered in his heart. He was very displeased with this woman's carelessness. If he hadn't predicted that there would be people who couldn't tolerate her and would try to trip her up again and again, if he hadn't appeared in time, she would have been swallowed alive and skinned until there wasn't even a trace of her left. What he was angry about was not that she was dead drunk. What he was angry about was that she clearly knew how much alcohol she could hold, yet she still let herself go. Could it be that she was so at ease? She was drunk and the person she met was him. If it was another man, would she also be able to show off her flirtatious side without any restraint? Were they like weak sheep that could be slaughtered at anyone's mercy? Mu Yaja's eyes were burning with fire. His usually cold eyes were tainted with flames, and he wanted to burn her to ashes. This stupid woman, how could he let her go so easily? He wanted to make her deeply aware of whose territory she was in and what kind of situation she was in. If he didn't let her experience some pain, she wouldn't know where she was wrong. His large palm reached into the hem of her gown and tore it forcefully. The priceless gown was torn into two by him. He threw the troublesome dress to one side and held her waist with his large palm, lifting her up high. Who am I? His cold voice sounded even colder in the breeze. It stimulated her misty thoughts and tried to pull her back to her senses. I don't know, look clearly, who am I? Mu Yaja fiercely left a bite mark on her shoulder. He would never stop until he achieved his goal. Yunshurshu tried her best to open her eyes wide, but in front of her, it was already a blur. Her body was very special, and she had never touched a drop of alcohol. Drinking a glass of dry red wine in one gulp was her limit. The drunkenness came quickly and fiercely, but it faded slowly. Her eyes were still a blur, so how could she see a person clearly? What did he look like? She could only rely on her remaining senses to touch the man's face. It was cold from the night breeze. She touched his lips, which were similarly cold, thin, and biting cold. Mu Yaja saw that her mind was still unclear, so he fiercely pinched her again. Holding her face, he brought his face closer to hers. His pair of sharp eyes stared at her as he asked again, "Who am I?" Chapter 207. This time, she finally managed to get a good look at him. Her small face seemed to crumble as if the world had collapsed on it. "I don't know you." She sounded like she was throwing a tantrum. She didn't know him? Or was she trying to fool around under the influence of alcohol and pretending not to know him? Could it be that she was going against him on purpose? "You don't know me?" Yunshurshu turned her face away. She didn't want to see him. She was using the alcohol as an excuse to throw a tantrum at him. Although she was in a dream, she could still recognize who the man in front of her was. But she was angry and didn't want to bother with him. Even if she didn't bother with him, he had ways to make her bother with him. Yunshurshu's body stiffened abruptly when she felt the hand roaming under her skirt. Her face instantly turned pale. "Don't touch me." Jerk, I don't want you. Go away. You have a fiancé and a woman. Why do you still want to provoke me? Why do I have to be bullied by you and suffer your anger? Why? He had a fiancé, didn't he? She even saw him hugging Tang Yu and rubbing their heads together after they got off the dance floor. He was no different from other men. He was an animal who thought with his lower body. Mu Yaja continued to turn his face around. His eyes were half-lidded and his lips were cold. Thinking about it made her even angrier. She said angrily, "I want to get off the car." The moment she said that, the man pulled her arm forcefully. Mu Yaja scooped her up and pulled her into his embrace. Yunshurshu was shocked. She couldn't help but gasp. In the blink of an eye, he had already carried her up and straddled her. Mu Yaja's eyes revealed a playful smile. He lifted his thin lips and said in a low and seductive voice, "Woman, do you have to be stubborn with me? Call my name." "No." Mu Yaja was dissatisfied with her stubbornness. He rubbed her plump breasts through her clothes. "Scream." Yunshirshi's body trembled slightly. Her face immediately tensed up as a bad premonition arose in her heart. Yunshirshir struggled uneasily, but the man clasped her waist tightly. His large palm pressed against her back, pressing her even closer to his chest. The two faces were so intimately close, the tips of their noses touching, and the breath of their lips touching. Such a close distance really made her feel uncomfortable. Looking at the demonic handsome face that was just inches away, Yunshirshir helplessly pushed against his chest. This man, how could his strength be so great that she didn't even have the slightest room to struggle? She looked away helplessly, but her chin was tightly pinched by his long fingers. She was forced to face his face. She was forced to look at his face. Her eyes narrowed in pain and were faintly moist. Her soft red lips were crystal clear, just like a delicious cherry. He fiercely captured her lips and sucked on them. That soft and sweet feeling was even better than what he had imagined. Once he kissed her, he couldn't stop. His body heated up and he greedily wanted more. Kissing her cherry lips, his right hand reached into the hem of her clothes. He was in the mood and continued to do what he hadn't done earlier. Her body was extremely sensitive. Just a light touch and she couldn't help but tremble. Her fair cheeks flushed red shyly, but it looked even more alluring. Chapter 208. He had really misjudged this girl. He had once compared her to a kitten. Now that he thought about it, she was actually a beautiful and flirtatious poppy flower. One couldn't help but sink deeper and deeper into it. Yunshirshir was quite frightened by this sudden action. She was a little embarrassed and even more frightened. She pushed his chest with all her might. However, her weak strength was not worth mentioning to Mu Yaja, who had trained before. He only used one hand to bind her wrists. "Let go. Let go of me. Mu Yaja." Yunshirshir panted softly and glared at him angrily. However, Mu Yaja was unmoved. Pressing his lips tightly against hers, he raised his eyebrows. "Why? Didn't you say that you don't know me, hmm?" The man's sexy chuckle lingered around her ears. He leaned closer and opened his thin lips. His snow-white teeth gently bit her shoulder strap. With a bite, a tug, and a toss of his head, his neat fringe brushed past her cheek. The buttons were loosened by his bite and her shirt was pulled down to her shoulders, revealing her fair and round shoulders. Mu Yaja hugged the back of her neck and unscrupulously traced the outline of her neck with the tip of his tongue. He smelled it with infatuation. Her fair and jade-like skin had the scent of shower gel and her natural fragrance. Yunshirshir was completely frightened. Both her hands were tightly bound by him. Her voice was trembling and she sounded aggrieved. Don't do it here. Want." That one word was enough to shut her up. She felt shy and embarrassed. This kind of thing was already embarrassing. Now that they were in the car, she was so sensitive that her whole body started to tremble. This man's physical strength was always so shocking. Now that the car was parked on the road, the thought of other cars passing by at any time, if anyone saw this scene, she couldn't wait to dig a hole and bury her blushing face in it. What she didn't know was that Mu Yaja had already ordered people to seal off this long mountain road and there wouldn't be any cars passing by for the time being. Compared to her, he was more concerned about her being coveted by others. But she didn't know, and fell into a state of panic. Why was it that in front of this man, she was always unable to resist and was at his mercy? He felt a wave of despair in his heart. His eyes stung, and tears fell from his eyes. Mu Yaja felt that her current appearance was even more lovable. That pair of sparkling eyes, the silent accusation in her eyes, actually made him want to bully her even more. Her fair and tender body made his heart beat faster. In the cool breeze with the fragrance of begonia flowers, the beautiful scenery under the moonlight made her even more beautiful. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes. His deep eyes were stained with a few traces of gloominess. He draped a large suit jacket over her body, covering her entire body. Under the cover of the moonlight, he took advantage of her in the car. That suffocating strangulation, her delicate begging for mercy, was like an electric current running through his back, causing his body to immediately tense up. Lowering his head, he bit that enchanting neck to vent his desire and hugged her hands around his shoulders. Yunshurshu bit her lips tightly, swallowing all the uneasiness and humiliation. Mu Yaja seemed to be a little dissatisfied with her restraint. He breathed into her ear, "Call my name." Yunshurshu gasped for breath. Holding onto his shoulders, her face was already full of tears. She looked at the man who still looked calm from the corner of her eye. Suddenly, she couldn't help but feel ashamed and indignant. Mu Yaja's charming voice was still in her ears. Chapter 209. Mu Yaja's seductive voice was still ringing in her ears. "Say my name. I like hearing your voice." "No," she panted softly and cried, stubbornly not letting him have his way. However, in this situation, the man seemed to have the ability to make her speak. In the end, Yunshurshu couldn't help but cry out in grievance, "Mu Yaja. Do you know me?" "Yes. I know you. What's my name?" "Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja." She moaned in pain and broke down. In the midst of their passion, the man lowered his head and kissed her lips. Sweet, so sweet. The fragrance of the dry red spread between his lips and teeth, and he couldn't help but deepen the kiss as he greedily sucked in her mouth. Perhaps it was because she was drunk and gradually forgot about her feelings, but she didn't reject him. Instead, under the guidance of his tongue, she responded timidly. The soft tip of her tongue traced his lips and sucked on his tongue. Her little mouth trembled as she sucked on his lips, licking and tracing. Mu Yaja couldn't help but have an illusion that he was hugging a cute cat. At this moment, the little fellow was licking his lips to express her affection for him. Compared to a wild kiss, this action was more seductive. His eyes couldn't help but darken a little. If it weren't for his scruples, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to resist devouring her completely in the car. She showed weakness, and his actions gradually became gentler. After the deed, she was like a quiet cat curled up in his arms, so tired that she fell asleep. He had taken her in the car, but he still felt more than satisfied. Just like a young man who had stolen the forbidden fruit, he was addicted to it after tasting it for the first time. The car drove all the way to a remote area, but the environment was exceptionally elegant. When the car stopped, the person in his arms still hadn't woken up. Perhaps she felt too embarrassed, so she simply closed her eyes and refused to move. The helper opened the car door and stood by the side, looking down. Mu Yaja carried her out of the car and walked through the luxurious arch of the villa. This was a villa that had just been completed not long ago. The preliminary plans for this villa had been made 15 years ago. At that time, Mu Yaja's mother was not in good health. In order to nourish her body, Mu Xing did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to buy a large piece of land in a beautiful suburb. He planned to build a landscape garden for her to recuperate. Mu Yaja's mother, Jianghu, was doted on by Grandpa Mu. Although this scenic area was far from the city center, it was still worth a lot of money because of the beautiful scenery. At that time, the old man even invited a feng shui master to do an on-site survey. This place was a rare and precious feng shui treasure and a holy land for recuperation. Unfortunately, a beautiful woman had a short life. His mother passed away halfway through the villa's construction. Her death was a huge blow to Mu Xing, so the project was temporarily shelved. It was only when Mu Yaja came of age that construction resumed. A year ago, the villa was completed, but it still had not been named. However, relying on its unique and beautiful scenery, it attracted the favor of many rich people. It even became the most expensive villa area in the capital. The sky-high price of a few $100 million per villa was daunting to many people. Chapter 210. This villa was designed in accordance with the Chinese retro garden style, with rockery, flowing water, pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. It was elegant yet luxurious. Grandpa Mu just had to casually say that it was under Mu Yaja's name, which made many people in the Mu family jealous. Naturally, Grandpa Mu's love for him was self-evident. However, there was nothing wrong with that. The original intention of this villa was to let Jiang Yishan recuperate. Now that she was no longer around, Grandpa Mu had poured all his love on him. Once they were in the bedroom, Mu Yaja carried her to the bathroom and cleaned her body. Ever since he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he had never served anyone. Inevitably, his actions were clumsy and hurt her from time to time. It was just that Unspoken was so exhausted that she could not even lift her eyelids. When he hurt her, she would open her eyes slightly, but she did not have the energy to complain. When he wiped her body, the man realized that this woman was thinner than he had imagined. Perhaps it was because she had just been breastfeeding, but the areas that were supposed to be plump were rather round. However, he could only hold her wrists with one hand. Her well-defined collarbones were like two pieces of jade, and her pair of arms were so thin that it was as if he could break them with just a little force. Not to mention her slim waist, she was too thin. It was better for women to be a little plump. It seemed that she needed to be nourished well. Could it be that this woman did not gain weight no matter what she ate? How did she survive for the past 6 years? When they first met, she was not this skinny. She still had some meat on her body. Mu Yaja did not know how difficult it was for Unspoken in the past 6 years. When she was in school, she had to take care of Yu, who was breastfeeding. In order to support the family, she had to work multiple jobs. At that time, she was still living with Yun Yecheng. When she returned home, she had to do all the housework under Li Qin's orders. For as long as Yu could remember, she graduated successfully, but because she had to take care of a child alone, she was treated coldly. There was no indomitable man in the family. As a widow and an orphan, she was discriminated against. He turned on the shower and washed the foam off her body. Then, he wrapped her in a bathrobe and carried her to the bed. Suddenly, a bell rang from the sofa. Mu Yaja was stunned and walked over. It was her phone that was ringing. She picked it up and saw little Munchkin's cheeky profile picture on the screen. The call was connected, and the childish voice of a child could be heard through the phone. "Mommy, my dearest mommy, when are you coming home? It's so dark and cold at home. Yu is scared. Mommy, come back quickly. Yu made your favorite thumb cake." His voice was so sweet that it was almost coquettish. The arrogance that he had displayed in front of him had faded away. In front of his mommy, he was just like a little boy who had never grown up and loved to act spoiled. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and suddenly recalled how he had poured a bucket of cold water on him that day. In his memory, this child didn't seem to be so soft and adorable. Unspoken is my mommy. She's the woman I'll protect for the rest of my life. I won't allow you to let her suffer in the slightest, let alone make her sad. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to bully my mommy and make her sad? If I see you let my mommy suffer in the slightest bit, I won't let you off. The smell of gunpowder was so strong, yet he pretended to be innocent in front of Unspoken. He was no different from an ordinary 6-year-old child. Chapter 211. This little lad was so mischievous. How could his acting skills be so good at 6 years old? It was not that Mu Yaja was not surprised. In fact, he found it incredulous. To him, this child was like a puzzle. How capable could a 6-year-old child be? An ordinary child of Yuntianyo's age would only be able to understand a little. The more normal ones might not even be able to speak clearly and would have to count with their fingers clumsily. He had seen children of his age who were timid when they met strangers. The more timid ones would hide behind their parents. Smart children like Xiao Yichen were considered gifted and had a higher IQ than ordinary children. Although he was usually cold to outsiders, he was still a child at heart. However, he would not be as smart as him, who had already learned to speak human language when he met people and ghosts when he met ghosts. Even to this day, he could not forget how his son had called him by his full name over the phone. His voice did not tremble in the slightest. It was very calm and carried an indescribable coldness and estrangement. This child seemed to already know the identity of his biological father, whom he had never met before, and had even coldly warned him not to provoke his mother. At such a young age, he was especially protective of his mother. Even the slightest harm done to her by the outside world would be infinitely magnified in his eyes to the point that it was unforgivable. 6 years old. He was only 6 years old. What kind of earth-shattering things could he do? He actually dared to boast to him, "Who do you think you are?" He even said, "I won't let you off." Mu Yaja was alarmed. It was not that he did not have a childhood. When he was 6 years old, he was still a mischievous child living in a greenhouse. Although he matured earlier than his peers, he did not surpass them by much. This child made him a little suspicious. What kind of mature soul was hidden in this little shell of his? On the other end of the phone call, Yun Tianyu was sitting in the study room, playing with the toy in his hand. When he heard the light panting from the receiver, he thought that the signal was bad and asked, "Mommy? Mommy, can you hear you?" "Yes." Mu Yaja spoke in a deep and mature voice. The moment Yun Tianyu heard his voice, his whole body stiffened as if he had been struck by lightning. "You? Mu Yaja?" Once the words left his mouth, it was no longer a childish voice. Instead, it sounded as mature as if two men were having a conversation, facing each other coldly through a microphone. He frowned in surprise and abruptly stood up from the chair, his fingertips trembling. "It's me." "Why, are you calling me by my name? What else should I call you?" Yun Tianyu sneered and suddenly questioned, "Why do you have my mommy's phone?" Shu Mu Yaja smiled. "Your mommy is already asleep. Keep your voice down. She's with you?" Yun Tianyu's brows furrowed in shock. It was apparent that he had yet to recover from this fact. That was quite a shock. "Didn't I tell you not to provoke my mommy? Last time, didn't you give me a multiple-choice question?" Mu Yaja kindly reminded him. He was obviously in a good mood as he gave the answer. "I have a choice." Yun Tianyu stroked his chin and thought for a while. "Family or enemy, choose one." "Mr. Mu, I think you've misunderstood something," Yun Tianyu said coldly. "I regret it." Chapter 212. Mu Yaja could not help but laugh. Where did this child learn to speak so forcefully? "Be it family or enemy, your choice has nothing to do with me. In any case, you are not my family." The little lad's voice suddenly deepened. "Return mommy to me. I advise you not to touch her." Yun Tianyu's voice was as cold as ice, making one shudder. His voice was obviously immature, yet his tone was extremely intimidating. Mu Yaja suddenly realized that even though they were from the same mother's womb, they could not be compared to each other. Compared to him, Xiao Yichen was practically a little angel. His blood flowed in this child's veins. His tone of voice was not inferior to his at all. Despite his young age, he was full of charisma. "You're not cute at all," Mu Yaja commented bluntly as he sat by the bed and reached out to caress Yun Shusher's cheek. "Humph. It's none of your business." Yun Tianyu calmed down quickly and paced back and forth slowly. Finally, he sat back on the chair steadily and took out a checkbook from the drawer. His good-looking eyebrows raised slightly. "Name your price?" Mu Yaja was stunned. "How much? How much do you want? Can you stay away from my mommy? How much?" Mu Yaja's lips twitched. Was this child holding a piggy bank and discussing the price with him? You want to negotiate with me? Can't I? Capitalists talk about capital and don't talk nonsense. Yun Tianyu opened the cap of the pen with his mouth. Then, what's the bargaining chip? Is 100 million enough? Mu Yaja could not help but laugh. 100 million? Where did this child get 100 million? When he was 6 years old, he did not even have a net worth of 10 million, let alone 100 million. He was still considered the crown prince of a financial group. Where did this child get 100 million? It was not that he was belittling this child, it was just unrealistic. Besides, did he even lack 100 million? 100 million US dollars, is that not enough? Through the microphone, the confrontation between the two men was in a stalemate. It was as if time had frozen. Not enough. Is 1 billion enough? Yun Tianyu smiled nonchalantly as he twirled the fountain pen in his hand like a capitalist who was determined to win. His nonchalant tone and the sky-high price of 9 digits. It was an eye-opener for Mu Yaja. Why don't we compete fairly? Mu Yaja suddenly stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. His tall figure was reflected in the clear glass. The smile on Yun Tianyu's lips froze. Fair competition? If you ask me, no matter how much you pay, it's hard to measure a woman's worth. In your heart, she is priceless. In my heart, she is also priceless. He. You're overestimating yourself. Yun Tianyu mocked him. Mr. Mu, between you and me, who do you think my mommy will choose? You lost. Oh. Why don't we wait and see, then? Hearing this, Yun Tianyu's expression slowly became uncontrollable. He clenched his fist and gripped the fountain pen tightly. Where did this man get his confidence from? How dare he provoke him? His position in his mommy's heart was unshakable. Was this man challenging him? Chapter 213. This man seemed to be determined to win. Did he want to take mommy away from him? If he lost his mommy, he would be left with nothing. No, he would not allow such a thing to happen. D****. Yun Tianyu clenched his fists and furrowed his brows. From afar, his silhouette was shrouded in an indescribable loneliness. He could not lose his mommy, the call was hung up. Mu Yaja raised a brow. He erased the call history and threw the phone on the sofa. Regarding the tension between the father and son, they kept it a secret from each other. He would not let Yun Xianxia know about the conversation between him and the child. Similarly, that clever child would also hide this from her. Moreover, in front of her, she would still pretend to be innocent and well-behaved. When he returned to the bedside, the woman on the bed was still sleeping soundly. She was so deep in her sleep that she did not hear the tense confrontation between the father and son earlier. She hugged the blanket and snorted a few times like a kitten. Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. He reached out to adjust the blanket for her. In her sleep, she seemed to be dissatisfied with the disturbance. She grumbled a few times, adjusted her sleeping position, and fell back into a deep sleep. He was already tipsy from the alcohol, so he did it again in the car. He wanted to go back here and continue, but she was exhausted. Her delicate face could not hide her tiredness, so he decided to let her go tonight. Yun Tianyu's question seemed to still ring in her ears. Don't provoke my mommy. The young child was like a small beast that had been threatened. His entire body was covered in thorns. Whether it was his words or his tone, it was as if he would not stop until he was in pain. However, it was understandable. Although Yun Tianyu was cold, he was very pure and innocent in nature. All these years, in his pure and innocent world, she was the only one who seriously played the role of a family member. Yun Xianxia was the only one who took care of him meticulously and truly loved him to the core. No matter how successful a 6-year-old child was, he was still very dependent on his mother. Now that he and another child wanted to barge in, how could Yun Tianyu not be on guard? How could he not take a defensive stance? On the phone, his tone was stiff and distant, but she could vaguely hear the helplessness and nervousness in his words, and even fear. But did he really provoke her? Mu Yaja frowned slightly. There was a helpless look on his face. If he wanted to provoke her, he wouldn't have let her go 6 years ago. He knew his personality better than anyone else. He was never passionate about something. However, once he wanted something, he would never give it up. Deep down, he was a nostalgic person. The phrase, liking the new and hating the old, did not apply to him. He also knew that he was born into a wealthy family, so he had no choice. The rich and powerful families were deeply intertwined and had too many interests involved. Especially for a rich and powerful family like the Mu family, there were too many schemes and schemes. Every step they took was as if they were treading on thin ice. Every step they took was as if they were treading on thin ice. With his status, the women around him definitely wouldn't last long. Chapter 214. More than a decade ago, his mother passed away. That parting of life and death was like a rib being cut off from his body. He did not want to experience that feeling again. Hence, he had always spared no effort to build a high wall around Xiao Yichen to protect him. She was like a small fish to him. He had once let her go out of kindness, wanting to give her a free future. However, when they met again 6 years later, he could not let go of her no matter what. He was dissatisfied with her family. He originally thought that she would take that sum of money and run far away. Perhaps she would study abroad, or perhaps she would meet the right man while studying abroad and spend the rest of her life with him. However, it seemed that she did not have a good life in the past 6 years. Her life was bumpy, and there were 2 burdens at home. One was her adoptive mother, and the other was her sister, who was not related by blood. They were like 2 cruel leeches nailed to her, wanting nothing more than to suck her dry. 6 years ago, his assistant had revealed such a detail to him. Yun Xianxia was initially unwilling to be a surrogate mother. During her first physical examination, a middle-aged woman was by her side. After some investigation, she found out that this woman was actually her adoptive mother. She was a filial girl. She had always been grateful to Yun Yichen, who had adopted her. After all, he had never mistreated her, be it in terms of food or clothing. When her adoptive father's career was in crisis, she was also very anxious about it. However, it was her adoptive mother who first suggested that if she signed this surrogacy contract, she would be able to receive a sky-high reward. This could, to a certain extent, alleviate the financial crisis of Yun Yichen's company. At first, she did not agree to it, thinking that it was too irresponsible. At that time, Li Qin was greedy for money and pressured her step by step. She even threatened her with death, saying that if she did not agree to it, she would not be able to continue living. Li Qin even threatened that if she did not agree to it, she would not be able to lead a good life in the future. Her entire family would be implicated by her. Yun Xianxia felt guilty and humiliated. She had no choice but to sign the contract. When Li Qin returned home, she pretended not to know anything about it and even continued to humiliate her. Her heart was so vicious. When Mu Yaja first heard about this, he didn't take it to heart until the test report was sent to him. He took a look at her blood type and, for some reason, took a sample of her blood for comparison. There was news from the genetics department that the paternity test results showed that the possibility of her being the missing daughter of the Mu group was higher than that of her being the real daughter of the Mu group. Hence, Mu Wanru's identity was very suspicious. Mu Yaja had long suspected Mu Wanru's identity. However, this suspicion, in the beginning, had no basis at all. When Mu Wanru had just returned to the Mu family, Grandpa Mu had collected a sample of her blood and sent it for a paternity test. However, the results were not wrong. Therefore, even though the child did not look much like the mother, the Mu family did not doubt her identity at all. However, until the results of Yunshirshi's paternity test came out, the so-called no problem in Mu Wanru's paternity test became the biggest problem. Who was the one behind all this? Mu Wanru? Impossible. How old was she at that time? What ability did she have to steal the test report? Someone else must have done something behind this. Chapter 2:15. Who could it be? In fact, he had already suspected Mu Wanru's identity a long time ago. When Mu Yaja was still young, Mu Sheng brought the 9-year-old Mu Wanru to him and told him that she was his future fiancée. Although he appeared nonchalant on the surface, he was very resistant in his heart. When Mu Wanru first came to the Mu family, Grandpa Mu was in a good mood and did not do a paternity test immediately. He only collected a blood sample and delayed the DNA test. It was only then that he realized that the girl's appearance seemed to be slightly different from her biological mother's. Be it in terms of eyebrows or facial features, they did not resemble each other at all. Hence, Grandpa Mu carried out the DNA test with a suspicious heart. At that time, Mu Wanru was still young and did not know anything about this matter. What could she possibly do at her age? When the test results were out, they were a perfect match. Even though Grandpa Mu found it strange, he did not take it to heart. He just thought that the child was still young and her facial features were not fully developed yet. When Mu Wanru reached adulthood, her facial features were already fully developed, but her appearance was worlds apart from that woman's. This aroused Grandpa Mu's suspicion once again. Mu Qingcheng, that was that woman's name. She was an adopted daughter that Grandpa Mu had met when he was middle-aged. She was not related to him by blood. Mu Yaja did not know much about this woman. He could not find a complete version of her information. It was as if someone had deliberately sealed her past. This person was most likely Grandpa Mu. Most of Mu Qingcheng's belongings were also cleaned up. Grandpa Mu was afraid that he would think of her when he saw them, so he sealed them in the basement. Only the jade pendant was left on him. He took it out at all times and stared at it in a daze. However, Mu Yaja did find out some clues about her background. Back then, in the capital, Mu Qingcheng was just a lowly singer in the Paramount nightclub. At that time, before she was adopted by the Mu family, her stage name was Qingcheng. It was said that she was an orphan and had no name. At that time, the capital was far from being as prosperous as it was now. However, with the economic reform, many wealthy families were quietly born. Even so, at that time, the Mu family, as a century-old wealthy family, was still the most powerful family in the capital. At that time, there was a bustling commercial street in the capital. Now, it was just a street of bars. At that time, bars and nightclubs had not yet become popular. Cabarets and dance halls were the most important places for the rich to spend time after their meals. The Paramount Karaoke was located in a bustling area and was one of the many properties under the Mu family's name. Paramount Ballroom was about to close down due to poor management. Later on, the owner of the dance hall somehow managed to find Mu Qingcheng, his treasure. Not only did she have a naturally good singing voice, but she was also good at ballroom dancing. What was even rarer was that, just like her name, she had a beautiful face that could topple cities. She was unparalleled in her generation and was famous for a time. Because of this, as time passed, her status in the dance hall gradually rose. Even the business of the originally declining dance hall flourished. She even stole the business of the most popular dance hall at that time. Chapter 2:16. The other club owners were all itching to get their hands on this treasure. They all offered high prices and tried to get their hands on this treasure. This was a money tree that was guaranteed to bring in profits and never lose money. At that time, there were many people trying to steal her. However, Mu Qingcheng was a woman who cared a lot about relationships. Even though the other club owners promised her much better treatment, she remained unmoved. Since then, Mu Qingcheng was recognized as the #1 singer in the city. She established a position that no one could surpass. Later on, the Paramount's business became more and more prosperous while the other club's business became more and more quiet. In the end, there was no other way. The other clubs had to close down, leaving the Paramount alone in the city. The club owner treated her very well and never mistreated her. After all, he was the face of the club. Naturally, he had to treat her like a Buddha. However, as time went by, he slowly began to have some thoughts about it. Since the beginning of time, which man didn't like beautiful women? Plus, she was such a seductive woman. Which man could reject her? At that time, Mu Qingcheng was a flower. She wasn't even 18 yet and was still very young. Without the makeup she wore on stage, she was like a lotus flower in clear water. Her entire body was filled with a fatal temptation. Once, when he was sending her home, he suddenly pounced on her at her door. Mu Qingcheng didn't think he would have such thoughts and was shocked. Though she was a singer, she had a proud personality. In a moment of desperation, she was so embarrassed that she forced him to leave. He didn't get what he wanted and left angrily. However, she didn't know that this scene was secretly filmed by a tabloid reporter and published in the newspaper. Therefore, the rumor about the dancer's impurity became a hot topic in the city. In just one night, her life had undergone an earth-shattering change. Originally, in the eyes of the customers, she was sacred and inviolable. However, as her scandal spread throughout the city, her image fell. The customers began to touch her. Their actions became bolder and bolder, and they became unruly. Every time she asked for help from the director, because he was still holding a grudge, he turned a blind eye. Mu Qingcheng was extremely aggrieved. She was suddenly tired of this deep water and hot life. She was also tired of being lost in debauchery. She was even tired of her own life. The rumors were getting worse and worse, and the customers were getting more and more unreasonable. Some of them even resorted to underhanded means to fight for the treasures. During the most difficult time, Mu Qingcheng had no choice but to shamelessly ask for the protection of a man. At that time, in the capital, only this man had the ability to protect her and prevent her from being bullied. This man was Mu Qingcheng. Mu Liancheng, Mu Yaja's biological father, was the eldest son of Mu Sheng's first wife and was the most favored son in his eyes. Mu Liancheng was young and talented. He was only in his 20s, but he was already worth hundreds of millions. At that time, he was already engaged to the daughter of the prestigious Jianghu family in the capital. Chapter 217. Be it in the past or present, Mu Wanru's appearance could be said to be a natural beauty. Her beauty, on the other hand, could not even be compared to her pinky. Hence, when Mu Wanru came of age, he did another DNA test for her. Somehow, Mu Wanru found out about this matter and hurriedly bribed the geneticists to secretly tamper with the DNA report. Mu Sheng, however, was kept in the dark and only thought that Mu Qingcheng's beauty had no successor. Mu Yaja, however, was aware of this. Before Mu Wanru, he had gotten his hands on the DNA test report without anyone noticing. Hence, he had long known about Mu Wanru's fake identity. Poor Mu Wanru. She was smart for a while but foolish for a lifetime. She only knew that through simple tampering, she thought that she could deceive everyone and hide her identity to the end, continuing to be a rich young lady in a dignified manner. Alas, she had no idea what kind of person Mu Yaja was. Ever since he was born, he had walked through the bloodshed of the rich and powerful. Power, wealth, competition, and scheming. Mu Wanru probably did not have the slightest knowledge of all the schemes he had seen. Mu Sheng was old. Although he was a scheming old ginger with spicier with age, no matter how old a ginger was, it was no longer shrewd at his age. It was inevitable for a withered tree to become muddle-headed. Still, he was not old. Mu Wanru could scheme against him, but she could not scheme against Mu Yaja. Mu Wanru alone was not enough to make him take action. He had always suspected that Mu Wanru was hiding a shocking conspiracy behind her. This was also the reason why he did not make a move. Old Master Mu was already old. Even though he was still the chairman of Disheng Financial Group in name and held the largest share of the company's shares, now that he had retired, he could entrust everything in the financial group to his most favored grandson and enjoy the rest of his life in peace. However, he was old and did not have much time left. Hence, it was inevitable that some people would set their sights on his inheritance rights. Although Mu Yaja was the rightful heir and the future head of the Mu family, the rest of the Mu family might not sit by and do nothing even if the old man gave his approval. Grandpa Mu had 3 wives, and the first wife only had one son, Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja was the only son of Mu Liancheng and Jianghu, but it was not as if there was no one else in the Mu family other than him. With Grandpa Mu's health deteriorating in recent years, those who coveted the position of the Mu family's heir could no longer sit still. Women had always been the victims of power struggles in the rich and powerful families. When Mu Yaja held Yun Shishir's DNA report, he did have some thoughts about it. Since she was the real daughter of the Mu family, and Mu Wanru's identity was fake while hers was real, then everything should be returned to its rightful owner. In that case, Yun Shishir was his real fiancée. He had seen an old photo of her, and whether it was her appearance or her refined aura, they matched perfectly. There was no need for further verification. As long as he brought her to Grandpa Mu for a look, he would know who was real and who was fake. There was no need for any additional explanation. Yun Shishir had perfectly inherited Mu Qingsheng's beauty and extraordinary aura. This was the best evidence. However, he did not do so. Chapter 218. A pure and kind girl like her should have a better place to belong to. To him, women were dispensable, and his wife was just a title. All women were the same. He told himself that he would never understand true feelings. To him, falling in love would only add another weakness to his body, and that would be fatal. Being in a rich and powerful family was not suitable for a woman as pure as a piece of paper. Now, however, he learned that he had a son, and under the meticulous care of this stupid woman, he was so outstanding. He had no choice but to rack his brains for a solution. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Mu Yaja stared at Yun Shishir's quiet profile and fell into deep thought. It was late at night, but Yun Tianyu did not feel sleepy. He climbed out of bed in his pajamas. Since he had nothing to do and was thinking about Yun Shishir, he tossed and turned restlessly in bed. Thus, he sat at his desk and did an advanced mathematics exercise book with all his might. He switched on his computer, and his inbox beeped. He clicked to open it. It was the information he had previously instructed Li Hanlin to investigate. Lu Jingtian. Her name was pleasant to the ears, but why was she so vicious? Yu quietly looked at it. His fair fingertips tapped rhythmically on the table as if he were seriously calculating something. Previously, he was full of grievances at Mu Yaja's place. Now that there was no news from his mother, he was even more vexed. Therefore, he was not in the mood to ask about this woman for the time being. However, just as he was about to close his inbox, Li Hanlin sent him a few more emails. This time, it was a few videos he had obtained from the hotel's barbecue. In a hotel like this, the surveillance footage was kept secret. Unless the police were present at the scene, ordinary people would not have the authority to access it. He did not know how Li Hanlin managed to get his hands on it. When he opened the video, he saw the scene of Lu Jingtian beating up a woman in the hotel's long corridor. The reason he could recognize Lu Jingtian at a glance was that he had memorized her outfit at the gala. Her gown was highly recognizable, so it was not difficult to identify her. The cameras in the Imperial Palace Hotel were set up very discreetly, but the camera angle was broadened to the maximum, directly facing the corridor and the elevator door. Those who were familiar with the hotel knew that these two places had always been the focus of the surveillance cameras. Therefore, there were actually two videos taken from different angles. Lu Jingtian could be considered to have committed a crime. In a moment of anger, she forgot to choose a secluded spot and directly went up to Yun Na to punch and kick her. Relying on her powerful and influential father, she did not have much scruples. The first video he clicked on was still a little blurry. From this angle, he could only vaguely make out Lu Jingtian's back. As for the facial features of the person who was beaten up by her, it was so blurry that she could not recognize him at all. When she clicked on the second video, she saw that it was a head-on shot of the two people. The angle was precise, and her facial features were clear. She recognized Lu Jingtian at a glance, as well as the face of the woman she had been beating up. Yun Na. He furrowed his brows. Did she go to the cocktail party tonight? Why didn't he see it? Could it be that it had something to do with him arriving too late? Chapter 219. After a long time, until 10 minutes later, she finally walked out with a flustered expression. After another 10 minutes, a few security guards rushed to the scene and took the unconscious Yun Na away from the scene. Yu Yu's handsome and youthful face was in deep thought. His watery eyes were full of calculation. Lu Jingtian, tonight's gala was really exciting. How could there be such an exciting show? Although he did not pity Yun Na for ending up in such a state, he only felt that she had suffered the consequences of her own actions. Although he was young, he understood the concept of karma. When a person sowed a seed, he would bear a fruit. Sowing good karma, reap good results. Sowing evil karma, reap evil results. Although he thought so, he was still shocked by Lu Jingtian's ruthlessness. Alas, this woman was too vicious. From the video, he did not know what she had done to Yun Na. Her face was covered in blood, and it was too horrible to look at. He did not care what kind of person she was and could not be bothered to pursue it. However, when he thought of how she had targeted his mommy at the gala earlier and how she had spoken ill of her, his face turned frosty at the thought. He was not afraid of anything. He was only afraid that this woman would use the same method to deal with his mommy. Thinking of this, he felt an uncontrollable chill in his heart. He double-clicked on the video to save it and replied to Li Hanlin with 3 words, "Wait for the right time." Li Hanlin could not help but click his tongue in wonder. Wait for the right time? Wait for what time? Was it not the best time now? He had racked his brains to get his hands on this video. He thought that Yun Tianyu would eagerly sell it to the media at a high price to tarnish Lu Jingtian's reputation. However, Yun Tianyu did not do that. Instead, he calmly asked him to wait for the right time. The right time? What time was it? He suddenly recalled a decision Yun Tianyu had made during the board meeting. At that time, Lizhi Holdings had developed a smart toy product, which was approved by all the shareholders. They believed that this product would be a trendsetter once it was introduced to the market. The first batch of orders had already been put into production. At that time, the market was hot, and the board of directors was anxious to introduce the product to the market. However, the contract for the product's introduction was passed to Yun Tianyu, and it was only waiting for his signature. However, he had been biding his time. The board of directors was anxious. They urged him again and again, but there was no response. They also sent an email with 3 words, "Wait for the right time." Timing? What opportunity? Li Hanlin could not help feeling curious. No one knew what Yun Tianyu was up to. Just as the board of directors was at a loss, less than 2 months later, a scandal broke out in the Mattel toy company's production chain. After an investigation by the International Supervisory Committee, it was found that the heavy metal lead content in the wooden toys produced under the company's name was excessive. In the risk assessment, there were problems such as excessive amounts of toxic solvent residue, and even the surface coating was prone to discoloration. Mattel Toy Company was one of the leading toy manufacturers and was also Lizhi Holdings' biggest competitor. The building blocks they produced were very popular all over the world. Therefore, once this scandal was exposed, the whole world was shocked and his reputation hit rock bottom. At that time, parents were very concerned about the quality of toys. Chapter 220. Lizhi Holdings struck while the iron was hot. They released an announcement letter, an internationally authoritative product inspection report, and mercilessly criticized Mattel for its unscrupulous behavior. Because of this, Lizhi Holdings held a grand product launch using Mattel as a stepping stone and made a beautiful comeback. That quarter, Lizhi Holdings occupied a total of 60% of the global toy market. It was also after this incident that the board of directors was in awe of this mysterious shareholder. Yun Tianyu once said that he would not make a move easily, but once he did, he would not give his opponent any chance to make a comeback. When he said this, he was nonchalant, but thinking about it now, it was chilling. For a 6-year-old child to have such business acumen and shrewdness, what was even more commendable was that he also had such charisma. No matter who it was, they would be shocked by him. Naturally, Yun Tianyu would not tell him what he was waiting for. He had his own plans. Asterisk warmth filled the room. It was rare for Yun Shishir to have such a good sleep. In the past, she had not been sleeping well. Most of the time, she would have nightmares, but this night, her sleep was exceptionally peaceful. At dawn, her biological clock, which had always been accurate, woke her up. The curtains were tightly drawn, so no light could pass through. The room was filled with darkness, but it was so oppressive that she almost couldn't breathe. Her head, which was hung over, started to hurt. The acid in her stomach kept churning, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. Sleepily, she reached out to touch her throbbing temples. However, a broad palm was one step ahead of her. It rested on her acupoint, and the slender fingers massaged it with just the right amount of strength. With a moderate amount of massage, the swelling pain in her head subsided a little. However, by the time she realized where this hand was coming from, with a buzz, a white light exploded in Yun Shishir's head. It was so dazzling that she lost her sight. She secretly peeked at the scene in front of her through a slit. She did not dare to open her eyes wide. She saw a man lying face to face beside her. His long arms held her against his chest domineeringly. Both of them were naked with only a blanket covering them. She looked down from the corner of her eyes and saw the hot scene. Her cheeks immediately became hot, and even her ears were red as if they were about to bleed. The man's body was well built. She had seen him in a suit before. He was tall and slender, but she did not know that his body under the suit was so fit and well proportioned. This scene undoubtedly caused her mind to be in a mess. Messed up. Even her breathing was messed up. Yun Shishir vaguely recalled last night's scene. That blushing and heart-pounding scene flashed before her eyes. She could not help but feel her throat tightened, and her breathing became difficult. Although she was not good at drinking, she could still vaguely. She could still remember her. In her memories, the man's holding her in his embrace, sat her, and they were so gentle that they seemed to melt into each other's flesh and blood. The more she recalled, the more. Her eyes could not help but redden. God, what stupid things had she done? She secretly blamed herself. She was clearly not good at drinking, but she still forced herself to drink a glass. That glass had caused her to be in trouble. How could she have been eaten up so cleanly just like that? Chapter 221. Sensing her slight movement, the man woke up as well. He had always been a light sleeper. When he was young, under Mu Sheng's arrangement, he had entered the special military camp for special training. Hence, he had an amazing sense of danger. Even the slightest movement in his sleep would wake him up in an instant. "You're awake?" Mu Yaja lowered his head and inched closer to her. His warm breath brushed against her cheek, causing her face to flush red instantly. His voice was hoarse and languid, as if he had just woken up from a dream. His deep voice was actually so magnetic. The man's question startled her, though, and her heart thundered. She did not respond and immediately shut her eyes tightly. Her whole body stiffened as if petrified, and she did not dare to move recklessly. This was her first time sleeping with a man. She was so nervous that she could not even control her breathing. One moment, her breathing was rapid, and the next moment, she held her breath. Her nerves were extremely tense. One must know that she had never been in a proper relationship before. She had not even held a man's hand before. This was her first time sleeping with a man on the same bed. She was so nervous that she did not even know where to place her hands. Wuxia could not help but laugh. This woman was actually pretending to be asleep in front of him? Her acting skills were terrible and could not even compare to her precious son's natural acting skills. He could tell at a glance that she was pretending to be asleep. "I know you're awake." Xianxia's heart skipped a beat when she heard this, but she still kept her eyes tightly shut. She suddenly turned around and pretended to mumble incoherently as if she were sleep-talking. Her body, however, inched toward the edge of the bed, only wanting to get as far away from this vile man as possible. The man got up slightly and lazily propped his head up with one hand as he looked at her with a smile. It was as if everything she was doing now was just a meaningless struggle. Seeing that she had already moved to the edge of the bed and was about to roll off if she moved even a little more, he could not stand it any longer and teased, "Now you know to run away?" Wuxia laughed inwardly. This woman was really stupid. He had already eaten her dry, but now she wanted to run away. Was it too late? The man reached out and scooped her up with his long arms. Xianxia felt the world spin in front of her eyes. She held her breath and almost cried out. When she secretly opened her eyes again, she saw the man's handsome face magnified in front of her eyes. Wuxia flipped over and used his arms to support her. He held her under his body and enjoyed her incomparably shy expression. Xianxia was incomparably vexed. Heavens, why did she have to wake up? Why didn't she just keep sleeping? When she woke up, the situation was so embarrassing that she didn't know how to deal with it. "You're awake. Are you still pretending to be asleep?" Xianxia pursed her lips tightly. She was so embarrassed that she didn't dare to make a sound. She just closed her eyes tightly, trying to deceive him. But the man didn't seem to want to give her the chance. Wuxia's lips curled into a mischievous smile as he pinched her cheeks. "Open your eyes and look at me, okay?" He didn't use much strength. Xianxia clenched her teeth, but she still didn't want to open her eyes. Opening her eyes would only make her more ashamed and unable to show her face. On the soft king-sized bed, it was his world at that moment. She didn't want to open her eyes, but he had plenty of ways to wake her up. Chapter 222. Pressing down on her, in this position, he possessed her. Even though she was somewhat resistant and repulsed, her reaction was not as intense as the first time. Her weak struggle was not worth mentioning to Wuxia. In the depths of love, she could only blindly bury her little face into his neck and endure silently. This delicate appearance was simply like an aggrieved kitten, whining and protesting weakly from time to time. Her hot breath blew against his ear, but it was undoubtedly a disguised form of torture to him. Little did she know that her actions had triggered a hidden undercurrent in him, almost turning him into a beast and devouring her until not even her bones were left. Undoubtedly, in this aspect, Wuxia was a man with a lot of energy. Compared to him, her stamina was really poor, and in the end, she was actually a little dazed. There were a few times when he wanted to get her on top of him. However, her body was extremely weak, so he had no choice but to press down on her like this a few times, which could be considered to have satisfied him. When dawn came, he stopped. As for her, in the end, she could not resist the fatigue and her body was extremely weak. She fell onto the bed and was unwilling to move. Her eyelids were extremely heavy, and she could not lift them no matter how hard she tried. She turned around and quickly fell asleep. The spacious room was filled with a charming atmosphere that was unique to those who had just had sex. Until his heavy breathing slowly calmed down, he was secretly a little puzzled. When did he become so greedy for women? She lay on her side, her body unconsciously curled up into a small ball. Her messy black hair was scattered around the pillow, half covering her jade-like cheeks, and there was an indescribable charm to her. Her sleeping position was always curled up. He had once read a psychological study that said that women who slept in this position would always subconsciously lack a sense of security. Her appearance looked a little helpless, and it really made one feel pity for her. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her again. With just one glance, a certain part of him was stirred up again. This woman was really like a demoness from ancient times. She was born with the ability to bewitch people. Even if she was lying there motionless, her calm posture was always so bewitching. He pulled her into his arms and carried her off the bed. He went into the bathroom and cleaned her up. In the meantime, he summoned the servants and ordered them to remove the dirty sheets. In her hazy state, she only felt a warm hand gently wiping her body with a towel. And who was it that carried her to bed? The man's strong and long arms wrapped around her waist as they fell asleep in each other's arms. For the entire night, all she could hear was the sonorous and powerful heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. For some reason, it was so calming. It was as if he was being carefully protected by someone. That night, she slept very soundly. It was as if she had not had such a peaceful dream in a long time. Just like that, he fell asleep in a daze. Half asleep and half awake, he slept all the way till dawn. When he woke up again, his stomach was growling with hunger. Outside the window, the sun was already shining brightly. He turned his head to look at the electronic clock on the bedside table. It was already 1 in the afternoon. This sleep was so deep that he did not even have a sense of time. Chapter 223. The window was slightly ajar, and the wind blew in through a corner of the curtains. The fresh wind blew in, blowing away the charming atmosphere in the room. Xianxia gradually regained her consciousness. She lay flat on the bed. Her waist and abdomen were unbelievably sore. Especially her thighs, there was still some tearing pain. There was an empty space on one side of the bed. He must have left. At this point, she could occupy the entire bed as she pleased. Reaching out, Xianxia covered herself with the blanket. She was furious and embarrassed. She tossed and turned on the bed, but her heart was weak. She could faintly smell the man's unique fragrance again. She felt a little repulsed, but at this moment, she didn't even have the strength to lift the blanket. He got out of bed and looked around, only to find that the bedroom was surprisingly big. She walked out of the room. The marble floor of the living room was cold as her bare feet stepped on it. There was a pile of brand new clothes neatly placed on the sofa. The reason why it was brand new was because the labels on the collars had not been cut off in time. The clothes were all very beautiful. Although the style was simple, the quality was top-notch. Just by touching the material of the clothes, she could vaguely guess the price and brand of the clothes. Then, she lowered her head to look at the price tag of the clothes. They were all expensive brands, and most of them were luxury goods. Originally, she didn't want to accept the clothes that the man sent over. However, she lowered her head and looked at the bathrobe on her body. She couldn't always walk around in a bathrobe, so she took the clothes into the bedroom and changed. Just as she finished changing, her phone suddenly rang. She was shocked and walked over to pick up the phone. The incoming call was from Gu Xingzi. She was slightly taken aback. Given the current situation, she even felt guilty to pick up this call. But why did she feel guilty? Xianxia was conflicted. She didn't answer the call for a long time. After a few seconds, the phone rang again. It was still Gu Xingzi calling. She pursed her lips and picked up the phone. Hello, Xia. On the other end of the phone, Gu Xingzi's voice was a little hoarse, but his tone was gentle. He was afraid that he would scare her. The concern in his voice could not be concealed, causing her eyes to become slightly hot. She walked to the window and pulled the curtains wide open. The sunlight that came in immediately stung her eyes. Yes, Xingzi. I heard from Qin Zhou yesterday that you drank some wine and got drunk. Are you at home now? Yun Shishir didn't know how to respond. She didn't even know where she was right now. Outside the window, there was an elegant scenery. This villa was located at the highest point, overlooking the entire villa garden. The scenery was beautiful. It's good that you're home safely. Did you just wake up? On the other end, Gu Xingzi mistakenly thought that she had just woken up and said, I'm downstairs. Would you like to have a cup of tea with me? Yun Shishir was shocked and blurted out subconsciously. I'm not home. There was a long silence on the other end. Where are you? Gu Xingzi was a little confused. The car was parked downstairs. He got out of the car and looked up at the dark window of her house. He frowned slightly. Where are you? I'll come and pick you up. Chapter 224. Yeah. Gu Xingzi wanted to say something but stopped himself. He only responded with a hum. He wanted to say something, but he realized with frustration that he was in no position to say anything. Yun Shishir was also very embarrassed. They were separated by a phone. They could hear each other's breathing through the phone. Both of them were silent for a while. It was a long silence. It was as if time had stopped. That was until she heard Gu Xingzi's faint sigh from the other end. Shishir, don't be afraid. Yun Shishir widened her eyes in surprise. Are you with him? Gu Xingzi asked tentatively. The word him reminded her of what had happened last night. Yun Shishir's scalp went numb. She nodded blankly. She seemed to have forgotten that they were separated by a phone and could not see each other. That man is not as simple as you think. You'd better not have anything to do with him. Gu Xingzi's voice revealed an inexplicable anxiety. That man was not as simple as he seemed. It was only yesterday that she truly understood the man's identity. The Mu family was the richest family in the capital. Disheng Financial Group's status was the center of attention. Mu Yaja, this man, had a supreme status from the moment he was born. She did not want to have anything to do with him from the bottom of her heart. There seemed to be a gap between them. They were two different worlds that could not be crossed. There was no future at all. Yun Shishir said, I know. You don't know, Shishir. This man is not as simple as you think. He paused and his voice deepened. Do you like him? Like? That man? No. How could she like such a domineering man? Yun Shishir was stunned. She immediately shook her head. Her voice was like a broken machine. She could not make a sound. Seeing her silence, Gu Xingzi said slowly, that man is very dangerous. You will get hurt if you stay with him. Shishir, I don't want to see you get hurt. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, my heart will ache. Yun Shishir's heart skipped a beat. Her brows furrowed as her mind went blank for a moment. Any woman would lose her resistance in front of a man's gentleness. Yun Shishir felt the same way. She, who was originally armed to the teeth, instantly lost all her armor in the face of his gentle words. Her lips involuntarily curled into a smile. However, this smile did not last long. Mu Yaja's sullen, handsome face flashed past her eyes, and she suddenly recalled her current position. This man did not seem to like her to have any contact with other men. Regardless of her position, she was grateful to Gu Xingzi. But gratitude did not mean love to him. If she didn't like him, what right did she have to make his heart ache? She said calmly, Xingzi, thank you. I don't want to implicate you. Involved? Shishir, listen to me. I may be much stronger than you think. He suddenly spoke, but it sounded like a gentle invitation. It was as if this man had spread his wings and gently invited her to hide under his protection. Shishir, let me protect you, okay? Yun Shishir's fingers that were holding the phone suddenly stiffened. She was caught off guard. Her heart seemed to have collapsed. Chapter 225. However, at this moment, she was immersed in her own world of contradictions and did not notice the dangerous aura that was closing in on her from behind. It wasn't until her phone was snatched away by a large hand that she jumped in shock and reacted. She turned around, only to see the cold and silent man standing behind her. He was looking down at her with an extremely cold gaze. The coldness at the corner of his lips and the sharpness in his eyes revealed that this man was dissatisfied with her at this moment. "Xianxia, are you?" Gu Xingzi's worried voice came from the phone. However, before he could finish his sentence, the cell phone flew out of the window in a beautiful parabola, along with it. "You?" Her eyes widened in shock as she watched her phone fall to the ground and shatter into pieces. A chill slowly crept up her heart. The sound of the phone breaking into pieces was heard and she trembled slightly. She bit her lip and her shoulders heaved up and down. The man pulled her back by the shoulder. His tone was cold and clear, but his pair of deep eyes hid too much anger. "I thought you were a sensible woman." Xianxia's chest heaved up and down. It was obvious that not only the man, but she was also angered by his actions. When did this man come in? Was he a ghost? How did he suddenly appear behind her without making a sound? This phone was the one that Wuxia had broken her phone and gave her a new one. It was currently the best phone among all the brands. She did not feel sorry for it, but she had used this phone for some time and there were many precious photos of Yu in it. Before she could upload them to her computer, this man had smashed it. This phone was very exquisite, but it had been smashed into pieces by this man. It showed how much strength he had used in his hands and also how angry he was at this moment. Xianxia, too, was infuriated and pushed him away angrily. "This is too much. Inexplicable, truly inexplicable. Why are you acting crazy for no reason?" She was furious, and all the anger that she had accumulated last night was unleashed. She had always been a gentle person. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. She also knew that she had always left people with leeway. She rarely got angry, and it could even be said that she had a very good temper. She rarely got into disputes with others. This was because Yu had once said that he liked the way she smiled. So, she tried her best to control her temper. But, however, this man had gone too far time and time again. After the outburst of anger, Xianxia walked around him and headed for the door. Wuxia grabbed her arm. "Where are we going?" "Go home." "Back to my home." "Go home?" "Not necessarily." The man sneered. "Are you going to look for him?" "Gu Xingzi, the man who can protect you." "So what if I look for him?" "It's none of your business. Anyway, I don't want to stay with a lunatic like you." Xianxia gritted her teeth and glared at him with her red eyes. She shook off his hand forcefully. She was caught off guard and was pulled back by the man. The back of her waist hit the windowsill. The sudden pain caught her off guard and she cried out in pain. "Wuxia, are you crazy? You appeared behind me silently and got angry for no reason. Are you crazy?" Chapter 226. Woman, don't you know your own identity? Do I have to remind you of your current identity for you to understand what you should do and what you shouldn't do? My identity? What's my identity? Tell me, what's my identity? Xianxia flew into a rage out of humiliation. She seemed to understand the meaning of the man's words in an instant. She grabbed his collar with both hands and said in a trembling voice, "You mean, I'm your lover, your woman, and your possession? Is this the identity you're talking about?" Wuxia looked down at her from above. His expression was cold, but he didn't say anything. It was as if he acquiesced to her questioning. Xianxia laughed coldly all of a sudden. "Wuxia, how can you be so overbearing? What do you take me for? What do you take me for? Your toy? Your personal item? Do you want me to come and go as you please? Isn't that the case? The man retorted coldly. He was obviously agitated by her words and his face was ashen. Your little mouth is so fierce. Do you have to be so stubborn? You're my woman now. Since you're my woman, please have some self-awareness. Don't go around flirting with other people. I don't like my things being touched by other people. I don't like it. Your things. Isn't that the case? Everything on you, including your person, is mine. The man's domineering declaration was like an iron law that couldn't be questioned. Xianxia laughed coldly as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. She laughed softly and looked at him in disbelief. A trace of sparkling tears appeared in her red eyes. Am I your thing? You keep saying that I'm your woman, but what do you take me for? Your toy? Your personal item? Alright, since that's the case, I'll return it to you. As she said that, she lowered her head and quickly unbuttoned her shirt. She took off her coat and threw it on him. She shouted herself hoarse, I'll return it to you, I'll return it to you. I'll return everything I owe you. Take it all. Wuxia looked angry. He grabbed her shoulders and stopped her. Why was this woman so stubborn? Was that what he meant? Was that what he meant? Must you belittle yourself like that? Am I belittling myself? You're the one belittling me. After a pause, she laughed coldly and mockingly. Flirting with other people? You're the one who's provoking me. Have I provoked you? Am I so cheap as to cry and beg to be your woman and ask you to keep me as your mistress? Am I shamelessly sticking myself to you? No. You're the one who's been provoking me. Wuxia, why must you force me to do this? What's wrong's wrong. I only signed an unequal treaty with you 6 years ago. I admit that I was willing to sign this agreement. You didn't force me. Based on this contract, you've given me a sky-high amount of compensation. But I used my rights as a mother in exchange for your reward. If my father wasn't in danger, do you think I'd be willing to do this? 10 million? 100 million? Can I get my child back? Can I get my rights as a mother back? I'll give you 100 million and you'll give me your child. Are you willing? Are you willing? Chapter 227. Her confession was like a sharp knife that cut open the sadness that she had tried so hard to hide, causing her to bleed profusely. She had drifted from place to place since she was young, and she had never even seen what her biological father looked like. As far as she could remember, she only knew that she had a mother, but this closest relative had left her when she was still young. She finally had a family. Although Yunyechen was not related to her by blood, he had still given her a family. Even if the members of this family were not friendly to her, she had never lacked for food and clothes. Repaying kindness was a principle that she had always believed in. One had to know that when her father was at his wits' end, he had been saving up a sum of money for her postgraduate studies. Her heart was not as hard as iron that she could watch her father be driven to his wits' end. She had no choice but to sign that humiliating contract. Was this what she wanted, though? She only wanted to protect her family. Wuxia was caught off guard by her series of questions. He had never seen her lose control of her emotions. The current her was in despair and helplessness. The strength that she had tried so hard to portray seemed to have crumbled all of a sudden. What did I do wrong in my past life? Do I owe you anything? Or was he a heinous criminal who had killed someone and set the place on fire? Yes. I'm in the wrong. I shouldn't have taken away your child, but you. That's my child, too. I'm willing to take responsibility for the breach of contract. I'll repay you with everything I have in this lifetime. You wanted me to stay by your side, and I agreed to it. Can you humiliate me like this, though? I'm a person, not an object. I have thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I know pain, too. Why are your words always like knives, stabbing me so painfully? I'm your woman, shouldn't I have dignity? Don't I have the right to even have a human's basic dignity? How lowly am I that you have to trample on me like this? Just because I'm your woman, I have to open my body at your command and let you do whatever you want? Is this what you want? I'm not. Wuxia suddenly grabbed her cheeks and shouted, "Shut up." He felt like he was about to suffocate when he heard her confession in her heart. Every word made him shudder with fear. He hated the way she talked to herself. Was he like this? Was he that bad in her eyes? At his shout, she bit her lip and didn't say another word. Unspoken glared at him, tears pouring out like a river. However, how could the grievances and bitterness that she had accumulated over the past 10 years be wiped out by a few heartfelt shouts and a few tears? She was not a puppet. She also had human senses. When she was happy, she wanted to laugh. When she was sad, she wanted to cry. But she could not cry. Yu was afraid of her tears. He was afraid that she would be sad. Therefore, she tried her best to hide her cowardice. Perhaps Yun-Na was envious of her luck. She was able to gain Lin Fengtian's recognition and enter the entertainment industry in one go. Perhaps her future would be limitless. However, she was also envious of Yun-Na for having a father and mother who pampered her unconditionally. They cared and tolerated her. She only wanted to be a normal woman with flesh and blood, not a walking corpse. She wanted to be loved, tolerated, and protected. At the very least, she did not want to be treated unequally. Chapter 228. Unspoken broke down and reached out her hand to push the man. However, this man stood there like a mountain. No matter how hard she pushed, he didn't move an inch. Her heart was even more defeated. She hated this man who messed up her life but couldn't do anything to him. Take it away, take it all away. Don't torture me anymore. Unspoken held her head and her back leaned against the window as she slowly slid to the ground. She buried her face in her arms and cried out loud. Like a child, she vented all the humiliation, anger, unwillingness, and despair that she had accumulated in her heart. Wuxia, I hate you. I hate you the most. Wuxia didn't know what to do for a moment. His heart hurt. He was flustered. He was extremely flustered. He had made her cry. Her sudden collapse caught him off guard. He stood there for a long time, looking down at her helplessly. He didn't know what to do. Why did this woman cry just like that? She even cried so aggrievedly and in such despair. It was as if all her defenses had collapsed and her true appearance was exposed in front of him. But what should he do with her? Could it be that he was wrong? Was it his fault? He only wanted to build a city and trap her in it. He wanted to give her all the things she wanted. Whether it was glory, wealth, or endless love, he hated other men thinking about her. He only wanted to hide her well and not let anyone covet her. Was that wrong too? Then what should he do? Wuxia's brows furrowed slightly. His heart ached so much that he was about to suffocate. He had never shed a single tear. Even in the cruelest special training camp where he was covered in injuries, he had never shed a single tear. And for someone as cold as him, he had never felt heartache for anyone. However, this woman was crying so miserably in front of him. It made his heart ache without any warning. Don't cry. He shouted. Unspoken didn't care about him at all. Her hoarse cries seemed to be complaining about his coldness. He held his forehead in frustration. A woman's tears had always been a man's trump card when he was caught off guard. It hit the nail on the head and there was no way to defend against it. Wasn't he the same? Seeing her cry, his heart ached, but he didn't know what to do. He had never coaxed a woman before. Was he supposed to coax her like how he coaxed Xiao Yichen? When Xiao Yichen was younger, he was most afraid of pain. When she was sick, she was especially afraid of being injected with needles. Every time she was injected with needles, she would cry non-stop. He hugged him in his arms and kissed his cheeks. With this coaxing, he wouldn't cry anymore. Lowering his body, he stretched out his long arms and easily scooped her into his embrace. In the past, this woman would have struggled fiercely, rejected him, and run away from him. But now, there was none. Her body was extremely soft, allowing him to hold her in his arms. She did not struggle much, but she did not stop crying either. She only lowered her head, crying non-stop. Rubbing her eyes, she didn't look like a 24-year-old woman at all. Instead, she looked like a weak and helpless little girl. She was so delicate and pitiful that it made people want to protect her. Mu Yaja hugged her and sat on the bed. Just like how he hugged Xiao Chen, he hugged her in his arms. The man's chest was extremely wide. His chest and the crook of his arm created a world for her to wantonly cry and throw a tantrum. Mu Yaja lowered his head and wiped away her tears. Lowering his head, he kissed her lips and said in a deep voice, "Don't cry, okay?" Chapter 229. She continued to cry. Her cries were so emotional and heartbroken that it was as if the world was falling apart. Mu Yaja leaned towards her lips again and bit her hard. He left teeth marks of varying depths on her soft lips, as if he wanted to use this method to block her tears. However, this bite made her tears flow even more violently. A trace of anger flashed across Mu Yaja's eyes. He bit her hard again and held her lips tightly. His breath smelled like orchids as he said, "Don't cry." The woman in his arms did not avoid his kiss, but neither did she respond. She just held her face in her palms, unwilling to look at him or respond to him. The man frowned. This was a silent protest. Was she protesting against him? Protesting that he did not understand her feelings and did not know how to judge the situation? Or was he not gentle enough and could not be like Gu Xingzi and give her a strong hug when she was weak? Thinking of Gu Xingzi, he felt anxious for no reason. Damn it! Woman, when are you going to stop crying? He glared at her, but she ignored him. She buried her face in her palms and he did not know what expression she had. Mu Yaja's eyes narrowed dangerously. He reached out and grabbed her hands that were covering her face. He slowly pulled them away, revealing her face that was drenched in tears. Her entire face was flushed red, especially her eyes. They were red and swollen as if they were bleeding. Her face was wet with tears, but the tears in her eyes continued to flow out rapidly. It was really confusing. Where did all these tears come from? Was this woman really made of water? How could tears flow out of her eyes so continuously? He could not help but lower his head and kiss away the tears at the corner of her eyes. It was salty, warm, and had an indescribable bitterness. Mu Yaja lowered his eyes and kissed her lips again. This time, it was not as rough as before. He only lightly touched her lips. Lowering his head, he could not stop kissing her tears. His kisses landed on her forehead, the bridge of her nose, the tip of her nose, her cheeks, and finally landed on her lips. This time, he kissed her deeply and did not leave. His gentle kiss was not as forceful as before, nor was it as deep as it had been before. Instead, it was just a light peck on her lips. Even Yunshishi could not help but be taken aback by the unprecedented tenderness in his kiss. The man's kiss was full of affection, gentleness, passion, and delicacy. While she was in a daze, Mu Yaja had already elegantly removed his shirt, revealing his strong chest, his strong shoulders, and his mesmerizing collarbone. She could tell that he was trying his best to endure. He wanted her. This time, he was very careful. He did not attack her like before. Instead, he gently placed her on the bed. The man's fiery hot body slowly pressed down on her, sticking close to her body. His scalding skin felt like it was going to burn her. Hot, so hot, she unconsciously stopped crying and widened her eyes in shock. The man's transformation was hard for her to resist. Her body, because of his caress, was like a soft flower that bloomed under him. His rapid breathing was by her ear. It was sometimes heavy, sometimes light, sometimes rapid, and sometimes suffocating. Her teary eyes were wide open, and she couldn't see his face clearly. While her mind was in a daze, he gently sank into her. Chapter 230. She didn't see his usual storm of passion. Instead, she clenched her teeth tightly and locked her hands around his sexy back. After the extreme pleasure, the man gently buried his face in her neck and gave in to her in a low voice. "I'll dote on you from now on. No one else can." Xianxia was stunned for 2 seconds. She looked at his face with tears in her eyes. Wuxia lowered his head to look at her. His eyes were clearly still filled with anger. He was still angry. However, there was also a strange emotion. Was that heartache? Was he, feeling sorry for her? The man got up and carried her into the bathtub. His family's bathtub was really big enough for his tall body to fit in easily. He hugged her in his arms and turned on the shower. The warm water drenched them as they looked at each other. After a long silence, the last bit of anger in the man's eyes disappeared. This time, it was her turn to be at a loss for what to do. She didn't dare move in the bathtub with a man. "You're not crying anymore." Wuxia looked at her and reached out to gently scratch her nose. Xianxia turned her head away and ignored him. The man's presence couldn't be ignored, but she didn't know what to do in the current situation. After the battle just now, even though it ended with a battle and seemed to be a draw, the anger in her heart still didn't dissipate. Wuxia raised his eyebrows, took the bath towel, put on the shower gel, and gently wiped her back. His touch made her shrink back involuntarily, as if she was angry. The man didn't give her a chance to explain. He hugged her body and moved closer to him to wipe her body. His movements were very gentle, but after all, he had never served anyone before. However, he had bathed her twice last night, so he had some experience. He rubbed her back and massaged her waist and neck. After lying down for a day, her body was about to fall apart. The man had extraordinary energy, but she was tormented by him. Her body was sore all over. He was only gently kneading her, but it made her suck in a few breaths of cold air. Hiss, it was sour and painful. This feeling was indescribable. "Don't contact him anymore." Wuxia continued slowly, "I will change the male lead for that movie." Xianxia's eyes suddenly widened. She turned around and saw Wuxia looking at her calmly. Their eyes met. "Switch? Why do you want to change people?" "I don't like him looking at you." Suddenly, he added, "I don't like him touching you, I don't like him kissing you. It's that simple." Xianxia glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. She was stunned by his words of dislike. "Why not?" "Dazzling." He pursed his lips. He just didn't like her interacting with other men. "Wuxia, why do you care so much about me interacting with other men?" Wuxia said matter-of-factly, "You are my woman." "Why?" Wuxia looked at her expression and tensed. "Don't change people." She didn't want to implicate Gu Xingzi. "Why? Do you feel sorry for him?" Wuxia's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Don't tell me you like him." "No." Chapter 231. Xianxia glared at him angrily. Why couldn't this man tell right from wrong? How could he tell that she liked Gu Xingzi? Wuxia laughed coldly. There was a strange emphasis in his tone. "It's very suspicious that you care so much about him, isn't it?" Xianxia was stunned. Men usually didn't feel anything when they said it themselves, but she sharply sensed that his tone was strange. It was as if he was jealous. In the past, when she hugged other children in front of Yu also had the same expression on his face. His tone was also filled with jealousy. She raised her eyebrows, but thought that she was overthinking it. She said, "But Gu Xingze is indeed an outstanding actor. I've seen his movies before. His acting skills are very strong, and his overall performance is very strong. After all, he has been in the entertainment industry for 10 years. He has a lot of experience." She continued talking to herself, but she didn't notice that a certain man's expression was constantly changing. He stared at her. When she mentioned Gu Xingze, his eyes couldn't hide the respect and admiration he had for Gu Xingze. In his heart, he was a little unhappy. He got up slightly and leaned his broad upper body towards her. He lifted her arms up high and held her palms, trapping her between the wall and his chest. He suddenly got up, causing the water in the bathtub to overflow and soak the floor. Yunshurshu widened her eyes in shock. Her arms were lifted high above her head. She wanted to struggle, but his arms were much longer than hers. She couldn't resist at all. Behind her, her back was pressed against the cold tile surface. A bone-chilling coldness spread from her skin to her limbs. In front of her was his scorching hot male chest. If women were made of water, then this man's body was probably filled with raging flames. His scalding skin was sticking close to her naked body. Her back was 9 feet of ice, but in front of her was a raging inferno. It was as if she was in the midst of ice and fire. "You! What are you doing?" She glared at him angrily. She didn't know what was wrong with this man. Wuxia stared intently into her eyes. His deep, almond-shaped eyes narrowed dangerously as he spat out a few words from his thin lips. They were as cold as ice cubes. "Are you admiring other men in front of me?" Yunshurshu retorted, "Isn't that so?" Gu Xingze is gentler than you. He's more romantic than you. Moreover, he's talented and has always taken good care of me." "Ha! Then is he as handsome as me? Is he as wealthy as my family?" He pursed his lips in disdain and rebutted her with a serious expression. The anger in Yunshurshu's eyes suddenly dissipated. The man in front of her was suddenly very serious. He was like a kindergarten child who was trying his best to compare his wealth. Just like the 4-year-old Yu, when she was carrying the neighbor's child, she also questioned her in a fit of pique. "Mommy, why are you carrying another child? Is he cuter, prettier, and smarter than me? Does mommy not love me anymore?" She was like a pitiful puppy biting its tail in front of her, complaining that she was giving her love to another child. The difference between her and Yu was that even though Wuxia pretended to be disdainful, she could tell that this man cared a lot about her evaluation of other men. Chapter 232. Wuxia, you're really like a child. Shut up. Wuxia's face stiffened as he said coldly. "Alright, I understand what you mean. You just want me to say that Gu Xingze is not as handsome as you, not as gentle as you, and not as good as your family background. You're so serious, you're really like a kindergarten child. Are you really 28 years old?" Wuxia glared at her coldly, grabbed her chin, and bit down hard. "You sharp-tongued little thing." She was pitiful when she was pitiful, but she was so hateful when she was hateful. "Can you let go of me now, young Master Mu?" Yunshurshu pursed her lips. "If you continue to be like this, I'm going to be crippled by you. It's best if you're crippled." Wuxia said coldly, but he let go of her and leaned back lazily. Yunshurshu rubbed her wrists unhappily. This man was really strong. She couldn't tell that he was so well built under his suit because he usually dressed so well. However, before she could relax and sit down, the man's arm stretched out slightly, grabbed her waist, and pulled her back to his chest, splashing water everywhere. Yunshurshu fell on his chest and couldn't help but glare at him angrily. Wuxia looked at her and suddenly felt that this girl was so cute even when she had a piercing gaze. "If you want to keep his role, sure. But..." She looked at him in surprise and stopped abruptly midway through his words. "But what?" "I'll tell Lin Fengtian when the time comes." Mu Yaja's lips curled up as he spoke. Even though the biggest investor for the Green Apple was not Huanyu, it did not mean that he did not have a say in the casting of the film. Huanyu Corporation was the one who had filed a case with the film and television headquarters for this movie. The initial funds for the preparation were also provided by Huanyu Corporation. When Lin Fengtian invited Gu Xingzi to act in the movie, it was also with his approval. After all, he was a capitalist. Investing in a movie was also a business. Naturally, he would not do a losing business. Gu Xingzi's box office appeal was not to be underestimated. If he was cast as the male lead, he would at least hold up half of the box office. However, he did not expect that Yun Shishir would be the female lead. At first, he did not get involved in the casting of the female lead. However, the interaction between Gu Xingzi and her at the cocktail party last night was too much of an eyesore. He was a businessman, but he was also a man. In his heart, he had already placed Yun Shishir under his name. Naturally, he didn't want any other men to covet her. As a man himself, how could he not see that Gu Xingzi cared too much about Yun Shishir? Was this how a senior valued a junior? This was clearly a man's intention towards a woman. Mu Yaja already had a plan in mind. However, later on, when Lin Fengtian received Mu Yaja's 3-point agreement, he was completely confused. At first, he thought that Mu Yaja had specifically asked him to take care of Yun Shishir. Naturally, he agreed without thinking. Even without Mu Yaja's request, he would have taken good care of this newbie. This was because he personally acknowledged this newbie with unlimited potential. However, when he read out the first few terms of the 3-point agreement, blood rushed to his head. What bullsh** T was this? Chapter 233. In Mu Yaja's list, the first 3 were, 1. No kissing scenes. 2. No bed scenes. 3. No hugging scenes. 4. Just the first 3 points alone made Lin Fengtian so angry that he almost vomited blood. What did that mean? Forget about the second one. No kissing, no holding hands, and no hugging? Was this still filming? Did they have to find a body double to complete the scenes of kissing and holding hands in a teen film? When he found Mu Yaja to protest, the latter sat at his desk and did not even look at him. He said coldly, "Shoot if you want, otherwise get lost." Lin Fengtian was so angry that he almost had a stroke. What could he do? What else could he do? Who was Mu Yaja? He was the crown prince of Disheng Financial Group. Everyone in Huanyu Entertainment had to follow his orders. What was the use of his protest? However, this was a story for another day. Yun Shishir did not know what Mu Yaja was thinking and thought that he had agreed. However, she heard him say, "But there is a condition." What condition? Mu Yaja's thin lips curled into a charming smile. He said clearly, "Kiss me." Yun Shishir was stunned. Then, her cheeks flushed. You, 1, hey, Mu Yaja. 2, his expression was calm as he counted slowly. He was so relaxed that he looked like a high and mighty monarch waiting for her obedience. Yun Shishir was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing she could do. She slowly inched closer to him. Ripples appeared on the surface of the water. Their bodies were gradually pressed together. She held his face in her hands and planted a gentle kiss on his warm lips. When she raised her head, she saw the man's pair of pitch-black jade-like eyes, igniting a cluster of flames. Yun Shishir's shoulders trembled. His eyes were very deep and dark, hiding a trace of desire that could not be seen. She couldn't tell, but she could tell that he was hiding something. Thus, the two of them faced each other like this. She did not dare to move at all. That's it? What else? Yun Shishir frowned. Woman, your kissing skills are really bad. Mu Yaja criticized mercilessly. I'm sorry, do you want me to practice with other men? Yun Shishir laughed mockingly. Mu Yaja immediately glared and threatened, "You dare." He reacted violently as if someone had stepped on his tail. "If you don't have any kissing skills, do you? Is there a need to bite when kissing?" She retorted in embarrassment. Was it her fault? She had never had a proper boyfriend before. At the age of youth, while other girls were enjoying the beauty of youth and having passionate relationships, she was working hard to earn credits, raise Yu, and work to study. Not to mention kissing skills, even holding hands with Gu Xingza at the cocktail party made her so nervous that her heart was beating like thunder. Mu Yaja smiled wickedly and said, "Do you want to try whether I have any kissing skills? Who wants to try it with you?" Unspoken blushed and said in confusion. Unexpectedly, the man did not seem to have any intention of asking for her opinion. He turned her face and pressed his thin lips against hers without restraint. This kiss was not like the one before, where he was attacking her. Instead, it was a gentle kiss on her lips. His moist tongue gently outlined the shape of her lips, delineating them in detail. Sometimes, he would crush them heavily, and sometimes, he would stay away from them. Chapter 234. Unspoken was a little dazed. She didn't know where to place her hands. Her hands rested on his chest as she clenched her fists nervously. This man had always been high and mighty. He was like an overlord who could call the wind and summon the rain. He had always been rough and irresistible. However, she couldn't react to his sudden gentleness. On one hand, he was cold and domineering. On the other hand, he was gentle and protective, as if he was holding her in the palm of his hand. Which one was the real him? Unspoken couldn't tell which direction she was heading in. He was immersed in it. She was also immersed in this tenderness and couldn't come back to her senses. Gradually, she knew how to respond slowly. After the kiss, their faces slowly separated. Her body seemed to have gone limp. Her limbs and bones lost their strength as she lay limp on his chest. Mu Yaja lowered his head and looked at her. Her eyes were like silk and her cheeks were flushed red. She was so pure and beautiful. Especially that pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes, they were shimmering and intoxicating. Even if he didn't drink, he couldn't help but feel drunk. He was intoxicated by her seductive eyes. No man would be able to resist such a woman. Even he couldn't resist such a gaze. He caressed the back of her neck and said softly, "You're not allowed to leave me." Don't. Leave me. He muttered in a low voice. If one didn't listen carefully, they wouldn't be able to hear what he was muttering to himself. Unspoken frowned. Her thin lips parted slightly, but before she could say anything, the man spoke first. "You're not allowed to refuse." That domineering Mu Yaja was back. It was as if the man with tender and sweet eyes just now was just a dream. Without waiting for her to react, the man had already gotten up, put on a bathrobe, and walked out. Unspoken was distracted. She lay down in the bathtub and sighed contentedly. She then realized that the bathroom was really as big as two of her bedrooms. Lying in the huge bathtub, he felt extremely comfortable. He wished he could just lie there and not get up. However, she suddenly realized that it was getting late. She should go back early, so she quickly got up as well. However, just as she stepped out of the bathtub, her legs went soft and she almost fell to the ground. Mu Yaja turned to look at her with a mocking smile on his lips. "Why can't you even stand properly?" Unspoken bit her lips. This man still had the nerve to ask. If he hadn't been so energetic and tortured her, how could she have ended up in such a sorry state? After messing around in the bathtub for a while, her body was still sore and painful. She cursed Mu Yaja several times in her heart. However, she was too embarrassed to say it out loud. She just glared at him and slowly walked to the bathroom. Mu Yaja looked at that slender figure and suddenly felt pity in his heart. How could this woman be so thin? When he did it with her, he was always careful, afraid that he would accidentally break her bones. It wasn't a good thing for a woman to be too thin. If she was a little fatter and had some meat on her body, it would be more comfortable to hug. At least, it wouldn't feel so cadmium. However, although she was thin, perhaps it was because she had been breastfeeding, her figure was still quite good. Chapter 235. What are you looking at? She said angrily, looking unhappy. The man said matter-of-factly, I'm looking at you. Xianxia pursed her lips and moved her body away, but she saw that he was still staring at her body. That unrestrained gaze swept up and down her smooth body, unable to hide the ridicule in his eyes. She couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Don't look anymore. Why, are you shy? Wuxia smiled. Xianxia couldn't take it anymore and walked up to him and forcefully pushed him out of the door. Get out. With a pang sound, she locked him out of the door. The man's lips curled up and he chuckled. This was clearly shy. However, he was kind enough to not tease her anymore. Wearing a bathrobe, he walked out of the bathroom looking refreshed and sat on the sofa. He held a glass of red wine in his hand and casually flipped through the newspaper that the helper had passed to him. When he saw the headlines published in the newspaper, his gaze deepened and he took a sip of the red wine. His face was full of self-satisfaction. When she walked out, she saw that he was holding his head in one hand and flipping through the newspaper with the other. She suddenly felt that the situation was a little awkward. He was so comfortable, but she was a little uneasy. Wuxia turned his head and looked at her with a pair of playful eyes. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up into an interested smile. The current her had just taken a bath and her body exuded a refreshing fragrance. Her wet black hair was draped over her shoulders and because she had just taken a bath, her fair little face was pink and tender. It was really a blush on her fair skin. A pair of watery big eyes stared at him shyly. Her hands were crossed in front of her chest as if she was shy and afraid. Her eyes were filled with a sense of vigilance. That innocent and messy gaze was as if she was afraid that he would eat her up. But it was this kind of small gaze that made it even more alluring. If it wasn't for the fact that she was too weak to stand up to the wind, Wuxia would have forcefully pulled her into his embrace, fiercely bit her lips, and pressed this enchanting and charming little demoness under his body, wantonly and ruthlessly ravaging, wantonly tormenting her, and heavily penetrating her body. However, he quickly suppressed the wildness in his body. Even though it was delicious, he could not be too greedy. An excellent hunter was full of confidence and knew when to stop. If the prey was scared away, then the gains would not make up for the losses. The future was long. Come here. Xianxia was stunned for a moment before she asked warily, what are you going to do? As he spoke, he leaned back even more. It seemed like she was really afraid of him. You were so sharp-tongued just now, why? Wuxia chuckled and gently swirled the goblet in his hand. He raised his eyebrows and said, are you afraid that I'll eat you up? She was really afraid that he would eat her up. This man was too energetic. She was really afraid that he would eat her up until not even her bones would be left. Xianxia pursed her lips and moved a few steps. Her buttocks carefully sat on the sofa but she sat far away from him. This scene was weird no matter how one looked at it. If it was any other woman, this kind of opportunity, they would immediately stick to him passionately. But this little woman seemed to be rather afraid of him. Wuxia gently took a sip of the dry red wine and patted the seat beside him with his big hand as he said in a deep voice, sit over here. What? Why are you sitting so far away from me?